I'm in a room listening to everything go on and just hoping she's alive. That was the hardest night ever.
Alex Scott!
140 caps, 3 World Cups, 4 European Championships and 12 international goals. Alex Scott.
Football was allowing me that platform to see things, learn things about the world that I know was making me even more hungry. And to keep that, I needed to keep doing well at football.
You couldn't speak growing up because of a speech impediment. How did that impact your life?
There's certain things I just can't say, but it's almost I found a habit of just laughing at myself before everyone else laughs at me. Here I am getting nothing but pure hate, death threats and abuse. And then I got to stage, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. My dad had this dark side. So my protection was to try and love my dad all I can, and all those darkness and the demons will go.
Did that work?
I've done this book to free my mum. On the other hand, I'm scared that it could ruin my dad's life.
Before this conversation starts, I've got a favour to ask from you. 74% of people that watch this podcast frequently haven't yet hit the subscribe button, and 9% of people haven't yet hit the bell to turn notifications on. The bigger this platform gets, the bigger the guests get. So if you could do me one favour, if you've ever enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and turn notifications on. Without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. Alex, we sit here in East London today.
Yeah.
And your story starts in East London as well. Take me right back to East London when you grew up in when was that, 1980 something?
84.
84.
Yeah.
Take me back.
Well, instantly, even when you say East London, I'm smiling because I have so many happy memories and the feeling that it gave me, a sense of community. Everyone looking after you, even though it's surrounded by struggle and hardship, it makes me smile. East London, instantly I can go to playing in the football cage because that football cage was a freedom. For me, it was an out, it was an escape. That football cage allowed me to start dreaming of a world that, I don't know, that I never thought that I'd be able to see or imagine. But in that space, it gave me that.
When was the first time you'd watched a football match? How did football come into your life?
I don't actually even remember sitting down to watch a football game on TV because both my mum and dad, they weren't athletes. So it's not a thing that we'd sit down and watch a football match. But in that area that I grew up in, that football cage was everything. It was the community. It was where people came together. And I think that's how I got into football, and that's what I liked. It gave me that connection to other people. So for me, it wasn't dreaming that, I wanted to play football or be a professional footballer. That wasn't it at all. It was a sense of a safe space in that football cage and feeling at one with everyone else in the neighbourhood.
Escapism, a safe space. Mm-hmm. Why was it a safe space?
A safe space from a home environment. The football cage was fun. I could smile. You felt free. And in home, it was like I was locked in. It was an environment where it was very much controlled.
Controlled by your father?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me about your mother and father.
My mum, a woman that is an incredible person, full of love, full of softness, and just a light around her that wants to do everything for everyone before herself, doesn't even think about herself, doesn't even see the person that she is, because ultimately that was taken away from her. My dad even though I see the love in my dad, I wanted to love my dad so much. I was a daddy's little girl. But he had this dark side. And that's the side that we saw a lot of growing up.
When was the first time you recall seeing your father's dark side?
I can't put an age to it, to be honest. But it was there, mostly what I can always remember. That you saw this love inside. And I always say the drink, but obviously the drink helps it come out a lot more. But you could see him turn, like his thoughts or what he was going through in his mind. That's how he took it out on, I'd say, all of us, more so my mum. But yeah, it was just, for me, it was just sad because I could see this good in my dad that was there when he smiled, when he was listening to music. And that's the side I just always wanted to see and was begging to stay there, but it wasn't.
In that home was you, your brother and your mum?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These memories, how old were you when you started having these memories about this other side of your father?
Well, he left when I was 7. So from the moment, from a baby, from 2, 3, I could see and feel, you can feel it, the environment that we're in, that you're not allowed to do something. Because if you do step out of line, you know what's going to happen. And you don't want that to happen.
What's going to happen?
What my mum would go through, the terror, the helplessness that you can't do anything. Yeah. So you're living in fear. You're living in fear every single moment. Hence why then the football cage becomes your escape. For me.
Did you want to go home after school, after?
Yeah. I wanted to go home to protect my mum. I wanted to go home to put a shield around her, to be strong for her, even though she was doing the same for me and my brother. But it's like you wanted to protect someone, but how can I? I can't. So my protection was to try and love my dad all I can, to keep trying to bring that side out of him. If he has the love, then maybe he'll start loving us in that way. And all those darkness and the demons will go.
Did that work?
No. No. It's weird because I sit here with you and then say it is dark, and straight away it's hard for me to talk about because I suppose I've hid it for all this time. It's easy not to talk about it. But even though there's so much darkness, there's so much, I remember the good times with my dad. I remember going to the record shops and buying vinyls and coming back and dancing. My dad loved his music. I love my music because of that. So there's so many things that, yeah, even though all those dark times, I know because of everything that I've gone through, I am the person I am now. You have to take the good bits and the bad bits, and it's what makes me me.
You said earlier that your mother she'd had her personality or the goodness taken from her. Yeah. You alluded to the fact that it was taken from her. What do you mean by that?
Because every single day, you see my mum walking on eggshells. She's scared to have a voice, to say something because she knows what she's going to go through. So that light that is around her and the woman that she has been, that outgoing personality, that, you know, everyone loves my mum. She doesn't see that because it's been stripped. She views herself as a coward, where as much as I try and tell her, she doesn't see herself like that. She's a coward for staying with my dad for those years, for not leaving earlier for her kids. So as much as we see her as an amazing woman, she doesn't see herself like that one bit.
Still today?
Still today. Still today. She's scared of my book coming out because I've finally told that story. She's scared that her friends are going to look at her in a certain way. Like I said, she calls herself a coward. Where I just see the woman that's so full of courage and the strength and the vulnerability that she's shown her whole life for us, for me and my brother.
In the book, you talk about 2 vivid memories you have of that time, and one of them being the day your mother did speak back to your dad at a joint birthday party.
Yeah.
Do you still remember that day?
Yeah.
What happened that day?
Stephen, we had the most amazing birthday party. It's hard because there's not many things that we've celebrated or those moments. And I don't even know how this party came about, whether it was for me and my brother or it was my dad throwing a party, because he was a big character. You know, everyone loved Tony Scott. He had this way about him. But we ended up having a birthday party in the local community, me and my brother. And just, the music, everyone was dancing. And that's where I could see my mum. You know, she was the life and soul of the party. Just her energy was so infectious. And then the party then ended in the community centre. We went back to the flat where I grew up in. And then it was just it's a tone that I know all too well, that no one else knows apart from me, my brother and my mum, when he asked her to go and get some lemonade. She was in the middle of a conversation, so a natural, no, Tony, you get your lemonade. And it was that icy tone when he repeated it. And she said no again. It's hard because I'm looking at you, but I can see her. So, Then straight away, I know what's coming. As soon as everybody leaves that night, he doesn't forget. So then, we all know what's going to happen. My mum might have been brave enough and forgot in that moment because she's having fun. She's having a conversation with her friend. And then, that was the hardest night, that one. You know, the thing about the book is we've never had the conversations. So my mum is trying to survive for her kids. And then I'm in a room listening to everything go on and just hoping she's alive. But she doesn't know what me and my brother are doing or feeling until I've wrote the book.
In those moments, did you speak to your brother about it?
No.
You talk about being awake at night, hearing what your father's doing to your mother, and never knowing if your brother was laid there thinking and feeling and hearing the same things. You never looked over at him, never spoke to him about it?
No. He was in the next room. I had a little box room. That was everything. And then there's a silence the next day. You're not allowed to speak until you're spoken to. That's the environment we've grown up in. So all you have is a look or trying to catch a feeling. And our feeling is mum's alive. That we've still got a mum for the moment.
When you woke up the day after that birthday incident, that party incident.
Yeah.
And you saw
I didn't sleep. I didn't wake up. Yeah.
And you saw your mum.
Mm-hmm.
What did you see?
It's just empty sadness.
Like, what can she do? Someone's so hurt that every time she moves, it hurts. I heard everything. I heard her trying to run. And then, as a 5-6-year-old, well, I just want to hug my mum, but we can't.
You can't hug her?
No.
Why?
Wasn't allowed to show love. I suppose that's why, I suppose like a word like control is easy to say, isn't it? I suppose until you break it down and understand that's the control. Like we're not even allowed to show love or hug or speak, really.
So the day after that incident, you're not allowed to go over to her and hug her?
No.
Your dad has told you you're not allowed to go and hug her?
Yeah.
What's the consequences if you hugged her?
That something would happen to me and my brother.
And did that happen to you and your brother?
Yeah, if we spoke back, if we didn't obey orders, if you show love, emotion, you're not being strong, you're not showing that you're strong, right? You just get on with things. Last night happened, you just get on with things.
When you look back, and you've talked about this in your book as well, about how in many respects that served you becoming a football player, and it made you a little bit more, I guess, resilient, shall I say. But when you look back at those early years and you see how emotion was disallowed or squeezed out of you, were there words spoken that told you emotion was not a useful thing, or was it just actions and behavior? Where did you lose that sense of emotion and love and affection? And
for me, I always had it. I know from a kid, I just wanted to give love, or see the light in someone. I wasn't getting it from my dad, or my mum was showing me in a different way. I know I wanted it. I was craving it. I remember my best friend Regan going around to her house and they're huggers. Everything's so affectionate. Stephen, I would like freeze like this. Yeah. She'd hug me and I'd just stand there like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do, what happens in this moment. And she laughs about it to this day. And still to the same, it's hard. You know, I don't hug my mum. Like, I want to. The other day, it was her birthday. I was like, all right, mum, little hug and pat on the back, love you. And then like she feels awkward. I'm kind of awkward because that's how we've grown up. We don't know how to do that. I find it easier now because I've gone through the process of learning that and that it's okay. But then when I go back into the environment, to this day, I don't think I've ever hugged my brother. Because that's still that environment. It's hard because for me, I feel so lucky. I've, this career, football, now in broadcasting, I've traveled the world. I've educated myself in such a different way, surround myself with people that are affectionate. I love giving love to other people. And then I go back into that environment and straight away I'm like this again. It's like that frozen, and it's hard because I've been on the journey. It doesn't mean you're ready for it, that I can try and bring it out of you, or I can baby steps, but yeah.
And I guess that environment is still a trigger, so you haven't recovered in that environment.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of happy. What's so interesting also is my niece lives with us. We've had her since she was 2, living with my mum and my brother at home in East End. She gets it all. And I see that through my mum, through my brother, for all the love that they didn't have or the hugs, they give it to her. Which is beautiful, like you said, but they still can't do it amongst themselves.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. The other moment you talk about in the book is the day that your mum told your dad to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. She said she found it inner strength. My nan had recently passed away, sudden. And it was hard for my nan, this story from my mum, because she knew what was going on, even though it wasn't spoken about.
Your nan knew what was going on?
Yeah. And then, as soon as she passed away, sudden heart attack, my mum found the strength to say, no, that's enough's enough. And she finally told him that was it. She said to me she was finding ways. She'd gone to someone like a homeless shelter or something to see if she did run, would she be safe? And then would they be able to then collect us afterwards? So she was trying to find ways to leave the environment, but she then always couldn't because it came back to me and my brother. And then, yeah, that day she finally, enough was enough. She said she just didn't care. She didn't care what would happen to her or whatever, but she knew that this couldn't go on anymore for the sake of me and my brother.
Did she tell you what she said to him?
No. I just remember getting the shout to come down the hallway. Me and my brother marching down and then waiting for an order or something, and then him saying that we had to choose, that he was leaving and we have to choose there and then, right then, whether we live with mum or live with dad. And then me just looking at my brother like, what? And he's making us choose like right then. And I knew something had gone on because mum's got her back to us. So obviously something had happened on her face or because she couldn't look at us.
It's a pretty disgusting situation to put children in, isn't it? To get them to pick a parent, because regardless of and you talk about this as well in your book, is regardless of the abuse, you still love both parents, right?
Yeah. That's my dad. Like I say, like I see the smile or how he is, and I feel just sad. Like even to this day when I'm thinking about him, I'm just like, suppose he's just sad. I don't want anyone to feel sadness, So I remember in that moment, like it's always my mum. I was always going to pick my mum. But it's the thought that my dad would be lonely as well. Like, why do I have to choose? Like,
in that moment, would you have chosen for things to stay how they were?
No.
So you would have chosen to just go with your mum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just trying to process as a 7-year-old that my dad might feel lonely and what happens to my dad. But no, I need to protect my mum. I need to be strong for my mum. I need to look after her.
And then your dad leaves.
He's gone. Not just leaves with everything. Everything. Furniture, everything. Not that we even had a lot to take, but it was still just, you make do, you get by. But yeah, he took everything. Mum let him take everything too, because then he didn't have a hold over her anymore.
Oh, yeah. And you stayed in the house?
We stayed in the house, yeah.
What was life like beyond that point?
I think that's why I'm so lucky, Stephen. I had football. I had that out. I had something to focus on. So I'd escape into a different environment that gave me structure. Where I think for my mum and my brother, it was a lot harder. You're still processing my brother. And I suppose this is where it hurts my mum, because she puts a lot of blame on herself. We went from a controlled environment, which very much I was still in a controlled but a disciplined environment with football was very different. And then so my brother totally went the opposite way. For someone that had been controlled and in that environment, he then had a freedom, but he didn't know what to do with that freedom. My mum didn't know what to do with it. So I think it was harder. It's been a lot harder for my brother.
When you say it's been harder for your brother, what does that look like in reality?
That I'd say even to this day, he doesn't know himself or what to do, his purpose, carrying guilt. We talk about strength and stuff. I know it's very different for men, him feeling that he should have been that protector, maybe, When he looks at his baby sister, I've managed to make a career or do something. And he looks at his life and what has he done?
Do you have these conversations with him as adults?
No. We can't. We've not had a conversation about anything. As a family, we can't sit down. We don't know how to. There's not been a conversation about anything.
Are you close?
Close in a different way. When you hear stories of brothers and sisters and like that love we have for each other is so strong, but in a different way. It's protecting from afar.
We'll do anything for each other and be there. But it's not a pick up the phone. How are you, sis? What's happened? What's going on in your life? But no matter what, you'll just always be there for each other.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there is such a distance?
Because you don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to talk. When all of your life, from all that age gap, when my dad was in the house, we didn't learn anything. I've gone away from that and taught and educated myself differently. But my mum and my brother still been in that. I felt a bit guilty, actually, because I remember going to therapy, learning all of this, learning my behaviours, learning then to deal with my emotions and talk. And they're like, great, go and do this with my mum, my brother. You know, we'll start open the conversation. But then actually it took my mum back to a place that hurts her. You know, and I did that. Because why? Oh, because I was ready.
You had a conversation with her post-therapy and it hurt her.
Yeah. It's bringing up all the stuff that's still so raw that she's never dealt with. You just got on with life. It's what you do, right? Just put a plaster over it. You get on with stuff. The mentality. Get your head down. You get through things. But actually you're not dealing with it, are you? It's still there. It's still raw.
And it will show up. It will rear its head in very ugly ways at times if it's unaddressed. Because it's still controlling you. It's just controlling you from like the back room somewhere.
That's what I almost think in terms of like domestic violence and what goes on. I think we deal with a lot of stuff till when the person has left the environment, right? But then a lot of the work needs to start afterwards also. Like those conversations, actually dealing with those emotions. What next? Instead of like, oh, they've gone, you can get on with life. Actually, you can't because it's still all there. It's inside.
Were you ever jealous of other families?
No.
You weren't?
Never jealous, no. I feel I'm lucky. I've had everything from my mum. I've had the love, the care, her doing everything she can. You know? So I've never looked at other families. And I feel lucky I've been invited into families that have shown me love or taken me away and had that. But ultimately, for me, my mum is absolutely everything. She's done everything she can. I wouldn't be here, this person right now, if it wasn't for everything that my mum has done for me in my life.
Comparison can sometimes make us feel sad, though, because it's what comparison does is it gives us these kind of false expectations of how our life is supposed to be going. So we look at another family and we look at Christmas. They're all sat there and they're dancing around the table and they've all got their little crowns on their head, and you know. And then we look at our lives and go, you know, maybe I wish I had all my family here and we could have these moments. You ever felt those kinds of things? I know I have. I spent quite a few Christmases on my own, even in the last couple of years. I think last year I was alone on Christmas. People don't really know about that, but because my family's quite dysfunctional, so getting them all to be happy in the same place is not such a simple task. Yeah. So sometimes it's just easier. I think I just flew to Portugal on Christmas last year.
Do you know, it's so interesting you say that, because I find myself removing myself from those situations that I feel uncomfortable with. So same thing, Christmas, I want to escape. Because for me, it reminds me of sadness. So it's not comparing to other people's families and the happiness and everything. For me, it reminds me of sadness. So then I'd rather remove myself, travel away, be away in my own thoughts, than sit through it and see my mum's sadness, something that I can't change in her. It's like as if I'm still failing to make her happy in those moments. And that's hard for me. So it's never comparing to other families. It's just that I feel helpless in trying to help my mum. That hurts.
Have you always seen that as your responsibility to cheer your mum up, to keep her happy? Because you talked about rushing home from school to try and protect her, and now that you feel like you're failing her.
I don't know if I've ever thought about it as a responsibility. I don't know. I think it's just something that's me that I'm a helper. I want to help people. I want them to be happy. I want to do everything I can for someone to bring joy to them. I don't know. Maybe it's because the upbringing, I didn't have much of that or something. I don't know. So I don't know. I've not seen it as a responsibility, but I want her
to have a life that maybe she's missed, you know, and bring her that light back.
In order to do that, she's going to have to confront some of the things that bring the pain back as well, though, right? Mm-hmm. So we see it so many times in our friends and people that, you know, they've been through something, you know, it's holding them back from living the fullest life they could live today. But in order to unlock that fullest life, they have to go back through some stuff and bring it out into the open. And I see it sometimes with my friends where I know they don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
But if they don't, then there's a risk that, in my view, and who the fuck am I to tell them about their lives, but they're going to end up missing out on the fullness of life. Yeah. So it's this battle. It's like, do you want to keep on keeping on and just keep it in the back room and live a less full life, or do you want to go back there and do the hard work to try and unlock your? Yeah. And it's a battle, and
it's like a fit. Yeah. Well, what is it? Face the fear, see the fear and face it and do it anyway. Like I'm of that mindset. Like it might be scary, but I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to give it a try. But then I suppose everyone doesn't have that mindset, do they? Like in order to move forward or see into the future, you can't if you're still driving, looking in the rearview mirror, like not dealing with all the past stuff behind. And then so for me, I think I've got to a stage like, why am I talking about this in a book? Or, you know, it's been hard for all this. Like, I've hidden it.
How long?
Up till now. I've never spoken about my upbringing or what's gone on in my life until this book, until this moment.
Why was now the right time?
Because I think I've learned a lot about myself. I'm older, I'm wiser, and I don't want the heaviness of it anymore, you know? And I actually ultimately wrote it hoping that it frees my mum. You know, it's part me, but hoping that this finally frees my mum and she can move forward from it all. That I'm okay. You know, Ronnie's done okay for himself. You don't have to protect us anymore. Like, let us look after you. You're an amazing woman.
When you write this book and your mum knows that you're going to be sharing this with the world, what are those conversations like to, I guess at some point you might have had to read this book to her or tell her about the certain parts.
She read it.
Oh, she read it?
Yeah. Okay. Not being just a biased mum, but she loved it. But she found it super interesting because once again, I've gone through a lot of stuff that I've not spoken to her about, that she didn't know about me, because once again, I've always been trying to protect her. So when I've gone through stuff, my first thing is I can't tell my mum because I don't want her to panic about me. You know, she's already been through enough so I can look after myself. So her reading stuff, she's actually learned a lot about me, my emotions, how I deal with things that have come up. And then ultimately, like I said, that when she was going through all of that stuff with my dad, she didn't know what I was in the room doing, that I didn't sleep once because I'm listening just to make sure that I can hear her move in the morning.
Heaviness. Use the word heaviness. You didn't want the heaviness anymore.
Yeah.
What was the heaviness?
Carrying all of this, not speaking about what went on, hiding it every time I'm asked about my mum or my dad in interviews. Because I think if you look back at everything that I've done, soon as this topic is brought up about my mum, I get emotional. Because straight away, someone doesn't know, just talking about my mum and me saying, oh, she's amazing. Straight away, I'm picturing everything that went on. That why I think she's amazing. But I can't tell you that. You just hear me get emotional and then I change the subject. But like I said, I suppose through learning how to communicate better and understand my emotions, like I just want to be free. Like I want to be light. I want to move forward in my life, not having any of it anymore. Like I'm at a stage in this point in my life where I'm ready to enjoy this stage, this next season, you know?
You used the word earlier on, patterns. What was the symptoms of that heaviness? How did you start to see it manifesting in your behavior?
Shutting off from life, shutting off from dealing with emotions, pushing them down, not letting anyone in to help me when I need help, not talking to anyone. Just, I'm always okay. Just carry on. What's next? What happens next? Yep, I can do that. Doing everything for everyone else around me,
but actually I just need someone to do something for me. Being like, okay, you're offering help, I'm going to say okay, instead of saying no to everything, because I can deal with everything. Which ultimately, that's where people talk about me and the trolling. And, you know, the trolls pushed me into therapy. No, they didn't. You know, it was just that stage on top of every single other thing that I finally was like, I need to talk to someone. This is all too heavy for me to deal with. Like, I'm in a dark place. And I can either carry on in that dark place, or actually I can do something about it.
This is post your footballing career.
Yeah, went into broadcasting. It was a lot of events had happened in my life that I didn't even know until I wrote down in a book, like a timeline. And I'm like, shit, no wonder why I bloody ended up in therapy, because I hadn't dealt with any of it. I just kept going. You know, that's been a mentality and a trait. That's the pattern. I'm okay. Alex is always okay.
Quick word from one of our sponsors. I've got a tip for all of you that will make your virtual meeting experiences, I think, 10 times better. As some of you may know by now, Blue Jeans by Verizon offers seamless, high-quality video conferencing. But the reason why I use Blue Jeans versus other video conferencing tools is because of immersion. Their tools make you feel more connected to the employees or customers you're trying to engage with. And now they're launching one of their biggest feature enhancements to impact virtual events so far, called Blue Jeans Studio. I actually used it the other day. I did a virtual event using the studio, which I think about 700 of you came to. TV level production quality, all done by one person with very little technical experience on a laptop. So if you've got an event coming up and you're thinking about doing it virtually, check out Blue Jeans Studio now. Let me know what you think, because I genuinely believe, I know this is an advert and I'm supposed to say this, but I genuinely believe it's the best tool I've seen for doing really immersive, simple but high quality production virtual events. Quick one. It's so crazy that in the last couple of months, I've had so many people tag me on Instagram, even on Telegram and in my Twitter DMs, in a picture of them starting their Huel journey. And it's one of the most amazing things in my life that I get to do a podcast, which of course needs money to fuel. And I have a sponsor like Huel, who I genuinely believe is going to help every single person who starts their Huel journey change their life. Because this podcast, the central intention of this podcast is to help people live better lives. And we get to sit here and I get to promote to you a product which has not only helped me change my life, but is going to help millions of people and is helping millions of people live a nutritionally complete life. It's such an incredible product. And for me, the reason why it's incredible is because it gives me my protein, it gives me my vitamins, minerals. It's plant-based, it's low in sugar, gluten-free. It does all of that in a small drink that tastes good. There are other products, there's foods, there's the hot and savory collection, many other things. But for me, this ready to drink is the absolute savior of my diet throughout the week, where I'm moving at such pace. Look, I don't want to labor the point, but if you haven't tried Huel, give it a try. And if you do, tag me. Instagram, wherever you try it, give me a tag. Anyway, back to the podcast. One of the things we didn't talk much about yet is, which I think would be a surprise to a lot of people, is that you couldn't speak for many years growing up because of a speech impediment.
Yeah. It's mad I sit here talking to you,
it's
like
crazy.
Chatting away.
Yeah. And then working in broadcasting. But when, you know, speech impediment is something, you know, you've gotten over the speech impediment and you went to like speech therapy, from what I understand, for a while. Yeah. The thing that's probably, you know, I assume would stay with you for life is how that makes you feel about yourself in a, you know what I mean? Because it's, you know, you've overcome it, but the thoughts of struggle or maybe like not fitting in socially or being a bit insecure about things can linger long after the solution's been found. Mm-hmm. When you look back in your adult years, did that impact your life?
How other people viewed me, I didn't feel like my voice was important, or I wouldn't be able to get across what was going on in my head. It's mad, you say I'm over it, I'm not. Like, it's just, I can hide it a lot better. Or I know that, okay, I have to reword things, or I memorize scripts, for instance, or I'm practicing them. So when I get on camera, I know that word that's coming up, I can't say. I've practiced it, but then I go to say it and it doesn't work because I just can't articulate where the words come from. Even earlier today, before I was having a juice, and I asked if there was, I can't even say the word, cinnamon or something, whatever the spices in it. There's certain things I just can't say. But it's almost, I found a habit of just laughing at myself before everyone else laughs at me, or then just not finding my voice, not speaking out because I'm scared. won't come out the way that's in my head. I know, like my brain works so fast. Like I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else, but I can't get it out.
How bad was it for people that might not understand what it's like to have a speech impediment when you're younger?
It's hard because you go back to the environment that I grew up in. It was actually then easier for it not to, because don't speak until you're spoken to. So it's easy not to speak. So, which actually then full circle, then my mum didn't detect it till later on, because then I just wasn't speaking, because we was in that environment where I wasn't really playful or speaking out anyway. So it's not until then, and then having to recorrect it. But then I'm in an environment with someone who I'm sitting with and I can feel like the love or they're caring for me. So then I think it's just a game, right? That I can feel something from you, that you're invested in me, which is totally different to what I'm feeling of my dad. So then you go back to those patterns. I feel like that's the pattern that I then craved with everyone. I then just want my first coach to see something in me. I'll do everything for you. Just believe in me. Like I want to feel that from you. Relationships, the same thing. It's like I'm always seeking that from what I wanted from my dad, I suppose, in my childhood.
Difficult to have relationships when the first model of love you witnessed was deeply toxic.
Yeah, the speech impediment. So not knowing how to communicate or speak properly, and scared of what I'm trying to say doesn't come out right. So from the speech impediment, it's just easier not to speak. A lot in my circumstances, that's how the speech impediment for me works, which is crazy because, like you said,
do that for a living now.
Yeah. How does that work out? Because the thing is, like on TV, I suppose I don't think about the millions of people watching me or that. For me, it's just always, I'm so interested in the person sitting opposite me because I'm learning. You know, the area of East London that I grew up in, I didn't think I'd be surrounded by people that view the world or have seen something in a certain way. And sometimes I'm not speaking. Like how you ask a question and you wanted me to speak. So the same thing, I can ask you something and you're telling me this amazing story and I'm just sitting there, even though I'm presenting, I'm just amazed because I'm just like, wow, I'm learning something here. So ultimately, yes, I do it for a living, but no, I'm just sitting there learning and only speaking sometimes, really, even though it's on TV. But like you said, in relationships, yeah, I know that pattern of not speaking, or when something's tough, I would run away from it. Like if you just push it down, push the emotions down, the next day everything will be fine. I'll carry on like nothing ever happened, which for my partner has always been the super hardest thing because they want to talk about it and get it out and all the feelings. But then I was always scared how those feelings, or if you got to that angry state, what would happen? Because I grew up seeing that in my dad. So then I just want everything to be great. Light, fine, everything's fine. Tomorrow, everything will be great.
But that's the thing in relationships. You've got to battle it out to resolve a problem. And if you don't, it ends up being deposited in the relationship as resentment or contempt, and it just stays there as an issue unaddressed.
Yeah.
And then it will pop up some other day.
Yeah. I think that's everything that happened to me up until I went to therapy, is that it finally all needed to come out. Everything. To deal with the emotions, the childhood, the speech impediment, hiding it all.
I've come to learn. I remember saying to one of my friends last week, I said, I think the single most important thing in any relationship, if it is to last, especially romantic relationships, is conflict resolution. Okay. Because, you know, I've said this before, but I see relationships as like, imagine 2 dots on a piece of paper and then the relationship begins and they become these lines moving as the relationship, you know, carries its course. And then there'll be things that start to make the lines deviate from each other and go a bit wide. But conflict resolution keeps the two people close. You know, if you know your partner, you don't like the way he eats that thing, you can talk about it. That's a trivial thing, but you can resolve things and keep yourselves close. When things go unresolved, it seems like these two parallel lines start to deviate and you move further apart, and then you're not having sex, but you don't know how to talk about it. So they just continues to deviate. So conflict resolution seems to be the thing that is keeps contentment out of a relationship, which Professor John Gottman says is the #1 killer of relationships, but it also keeps us close. if you're not a master in conflict resolution, it must be quite, because you want to avoid conflict entirely, or you don't know how to communicate in a way that's going to help you to resolve the conflict. It must be difficult.
I'd say difficult, but then I would just always find a way of, which then obviously is not right, which I've now figured out about myself. I would change things. I would stop doing things to try and make my partner happy.
Yeah.
So I'm then changing myself. I'm not being my true authentic self because yes, I'm avoiding the conflict and everything, but in doing so, I've stopped doing what I want to do or what I like, just to then always keep everything nice and happy.
And then you'll resent. That's where the contempt shows up. Because you think, fuck, I'm not doing this for him and I'm not doing this. And
But then I wouldn't even speak about that.
Yeah.
Like that would be then. So I'd just sit there, silence. Like, why am I mad? What's going on in my head? Like, why am I feeling this? What's going on? Yeah, because I've changed and I'm doing everything just to try and keep being happy.
And you've solved that?
I don't think you'd ever solve anything. I'm learning, It's interesting. What did I hear the other day about, we spend more time as people studying other people, what you wear, what you study, how you act, how you behave, than actually spending time studying ourselves. And so I'd say over the last 2.5 years or since going to therapy, I'm studying myself more. So those patterns, those learning how to communicate better or what I do, which will then help me in a relationship moving forward, hopefully.
When you look back at your football career, big smile on your face. A really, really amazing career. You're very much considered a legend in the game. Why do you think you were successful at football? When you look back, what was it about you and your character that separated you from those, thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people you were competing with to play for England or to play for Arsenal?
I think it goes back to the cage, first of all. For me, football was just always, it was an escape and a happy place. And I was scared to always lose that. So even though I went on 140 caps for England, and then there'd be people like, yeah, you're the first name on a team sheet, you're a favourite. I played every game for England kind of with that fear that it could be taken away. This could be my last game. Like, what if I don't get picked next week? What am I going to do? Like, it's all I've ever known in my life. I know I wasn't the most talented. I wasn't. There was people that were supposed to be at the top and make it. They were the next best thing in women's football. No one ever spoke about me like that in terms of growing up in the Arsenal team. I was Al that grew up in East London. I loved Arsenal. That's how everyone viewed me. I just loved the club, because for me it was a home. But no one ever spoke that I was going to make it. But I suppose that's where I just wanted people to believe in me, So it was like, I will do everything to prove to you, I've got something. Just look at me, I've got something. I love this place. So I think it was driven by that, really. And a feeling of not wanting to let people down, even though they didn't believe in me.
How did that manifest in terms of your training and your performance and your preparation and your, dare I guess, your obsession?
Trying to be the best that I can be every day.
In every training session?
In every training session. Like, I've been given an opportunity. How dare I turn up to training and not leave giving it my all, or come into training and be like, I don't fancy it today. Like, I'm so lucky. Like, I've come from a council estate on a concrete football pitch, and now I get to walk in at Highbury or be at the Arsenal men's training ground. It's like, who am I to be like, nah, I don't fancy it today. Like, I just loved what it was giving me in my life.
It's funny, we often we ask motivated people, we say, how do you stay motivated? But when you look under the hood, it tends to be less of a choice than we think, in the sense of, it's not like I'm waking up and going, I'm going to be motivated, looking in the mirror and going, come on, we've got this. It's more sometimes, as you described it, like an escape from something else. And we don't think of motivation as escapism all the time, or insecurity, but it so often is.
Yeah. I just knew what football was giving me in my life. Something that, I had dreams, but never dreamed that I'd be able to travel the world. Or, you know, I remember in the youth age groups getting on a minibus to go into Nottingham, you know, like, where is this place? Didn't even know this place existed in the UK, you know, and here I am on a minibus eating a sandwich for a packed lunch, you know, I've been out the house all day. It's like, great. I didn't want to let go of that. Playing for England, I got to go on an aeroplane, I got to go to China. What? Oh my gosh, I didn't even know how many hours on a plane that was. You know, all those things were just feeding more. I knew it was more than football, but football was allowing me that platform to see things and learn things about the world that I know was making me even more hungry to keep it. And to keep that, I needed to keep doing well at football.
And you end up retiring at 33, 34. You quit the international team at 33, quit Arsenal at 34. If football was giving you all that you've described there, how did it feel to come to the end of your time with Arsenal and the England team?
Because I was learning more. I was learning more about the world and from other people. And actually then I knew towards the end of my football career, it was giving me those feelings that I didn't want, the heaviness, and actually a feeling, this is not enough for me anymore. Not a feeling of being trapped. Trapped is the wrong word. But it was heavy towards the end of my career. I was taking on a lot of emotions, responsibility. I was captain, but in terms of, I don't know, I've always been this person where people can offload all their emotions on me. So I'd do that. I'd take that home. I'd try and solve a lot of problems on and off the pitch. And I wasn't happy anymore in my last couple of seasons. What I didn't know, I remember doing a documentary about mental health, and the doctor, Tanya Byron is her name. She described it to me so well. I didn't know. I was like a functional depressive this whole time. And that started in those later years of my footballing career. But I didn't know how to describe it or what I was feeling. You know, I was just turning up. I wasn't happy. It was heavy, taking on everyone's emotions, management, players, trying to fix everything. And then I'd be home in the evening and be like, whoa, I don't want to talk to anyone. Like I physically couldn't talk to anyone. Which are those patterns? Then I'd swish off from the world. If you try and phone me, call me, won't pick up. Mum, yeah, I'm okay. Don't want to have a conversation, because everything was just then heavy. No one in football knows that, because I could go to football, I'd put on a face. Like I'm Alex, like, yeah, everything's great. Leader, captain, great. But then I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I did a TV show, Bear Grylls, and that was the first time I knew I was ready to retire from football. I was surrounded by different people, different conversation about life, other than being in a football bubble where everything you're consumed by, you think everything's just sport going on in the world. But I know I've always needed more. I know that's what's always been the spark in me about life. And it was the first time I started having conversations about the world, about other people's lives. I'd sit under the stars. It sounds like some Hollywood movie, but every night for survival, we had like a stint that we had to keep the fire alight on Bear Grylls. And I remember just sitting there, keeping the fire alight, looking up at the stars and be like, I'm ready for my next chapter. Like I know there's another chapter. And it was just being brave enough to then take it.
And how did you know that would be in media? Or did you not know?
I didn't know, no. Okay. I think I was always frustrated from being away with England or even in Boston, that I'd see a teammate full of personality, life and soul, just this bubbliness about him, get asked a question or being interviewed straight after a game and go in themselves. And I'd be confused. I'd be like, what are you doing? That's not you. Like I didn't understand. So I remember just randomly asking one of the camera guys, like, oh, let me interview her after. Let me just ask some questions. And then straight away doing that and then seeing a teammate relax. And then everyone saying to me, Alex, you know you're natural. And I'm like, what's the natural? I'm just asking some questions. Like, I don't get it. So you don't, same thing when people be like, you sit in front of a camera and talk. Same, I don't think about the millions. Maybe that's why I'm not sat there in that frozen state in fear looking at cameras, because for me, the conversation is what feeds me. I like seeing people relax and be fun. So I just started doing more of it. And then I was like, right, scared about the next chapter after football. I was like, what am I going to do? People were trying to push me into management. And I was like,
it's not me. I don't have a passion to be a manager. Not at this stage. I've not seen myself in that role. And I was like, no, I need to do something that I love, that I get a passion and an energy from. And so that's why I did a media degree. I was like, right, if I'm going to do this, I know that I'm going to be judged, you know, and I don't like the feeling of anything just being given to you. So I'm like, no, I'm going to work for it. Just like I had to do my football career, I'll work for it. I'll do a media degree. So went and did that whilst I was still playing for Arsenal. And yeah, decided that in 2018, I was ready. I felt ready. I had a 2-year contract on the table from Arsenal to sign. That's the comfort zone, the comfort blanket that I could have easily taken that. I'm still trying to pay my mortgage. I suppose most of my life is that the fear of not having money to pay my bills and the debt man knocking on the door. Like I grew up seeing him come around every Thursday, you know, that fear. But I was like, no, I can't sign that contract. I know how unhappy I will be.
Did you have an alternative at that point? Did you have a contract from...
No. Nothing there.
So what is that gap that, you know, I think about it like monkey swinging through a jungle. You've got to let go of the last branch and just have faith that you're going to grab the next one.
Yeah.
What was that period like in your life where you don't sign the contract and then you're looking for your next thing?
Because I suppose I've always had the fear, or a lot of people, what if it doesn't work out? Well, actually, I suppose I've always been the opposite. What if it does work out? I don't want to be held back in fear of, no, just in case. So it's more like I knew the headspace that I was in, I couldn't sign that 2-year contract. It'd be unfair. It'd be unfair to myself. It'd be unfair to my teammates, because I'd just be turning up to collect, you know, my monthly salary at the end, which isn't a lot, nothing like men or whatever, but it was enough to be secure and pay my mortgage monthly. But I know I couldn't do it. It was unfair.
When did your first broadcasting job emerge then after that?
It's weird because I was doing random stuff for BBC, like appearing on a like women's football show or something. And it's when I announced my retirement, that's when it just went, okay. It's like I was free, and then people were like, well, she's free to do more. She's got more hours in her day. Like she can actually start doing some work. And then from BBC, yeah, they started offering me more. I was appearing on some of their flagship shows, Football Focus or kind of those ones. And then, yeah, I suppose 2018 for me was that year when, because then I went off to the World Cup. 2018, the first female pundit for the BBC. And I suppose from there, then it continued.
You talk about coming home one day through that period, and this is the part where you start talking about this functional or functioning depression. And you talk about looking at yourself in the mirror and then walking past it, taking a couple of steps back and looking at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Tell me about that day, that evening, what happened, and you end up like collapsing and, you know, having a bit of a moment.
Yeah. Do you know, I remember that like it's yesterday. Yeah. I keep going back to the word heavy, I think, because that's straight away I feel it. I didn't know, well, I know I did, that I was carrying a lot. I'd carried a lot through my football career, which I didn't really know. I was just doing it all, trying to solve everything. Straight away, I took that into my broadcasting career. And like all these great things that, yes, I'm the first this, I'm the first that. I never set out to be that. I was just following something that I love, that I had a passion for. And then so all the stuff and I suppose the pressure that came with that, I didn't know, I wasn't putting it on myself, but the expectation for me, the expectation I was putting on myself was not to let anyone down. Like I've been given a chance. Like I can't let my BBC boss down. Like I've got this person that's finally believing in me. He's given me an opportunity to go to a men's World Cup. Like this is big. Like, so I was working so much, doing so much, not to let anyone down. And then ultimately on top of that, as you're becoming the first, as I'm the first female, all the negative stuff that come with that, all the trolling, all the online abuse, all of that. Like it just got to a stage where I couldn't take it anymore. Like I'd been numbing everything, just carrying on. I can't show I'm weak. If I show I'm not strong, if I show my weakness, then the only thing I can't handle it. Oh no, here she is. Look, a female can't handle it. It's too much for her.
So all of this I'd just been bottling and just carrying on, putting on this face, like everything's okay. And then that night was when it all got too much. I didn't want to come home. I was drinking to switch off, to sleep, to numb it all, to forget about it. And I just got to a stage where I'd had a dad filled with drink. An uncle passed away, was an alcoholic. It's like drink problem and alcohol has been huge in my life. And here I was repeating those same patterns. Drinking every night to switch off from the world.
After work?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be presenting on TV and then you'd come home and...
Yeah, to switch off from it all. Switch off from just life. Switch off from not talking to someone. Don't want to speak because then I'd have to speak about emotions and the heaviness continues, right? But if I don't speak about it, it's great, it's going to go away. But actually it doesn't. It just gets bigger and bigger. And I think it was, we go back to how you said about Christmas and New Year. It was that I was on my own because it was my choice, wanted to escape everything, the feelings, and then just being so sad. So sad. And I was like, I can't continue like this. So it was that choice in that moment, the next day, to Google therapy.
What happened that night?
Just couldn't stop crying. Just could not stop crying. Drinking. Then the drinking wasn't switching off what was going on in my head. Just numb. I was literally on my bed, curled up, just uncontrollably crying. And I don't know why. I don't know why I was crying the way I was. And why should I be crying? Because from the outside, I'm okay. I've had an amazing football career. I'm now working on TV. I can still pay my bills. Like, why should I be sad from the outside world? Who am I to be sad? I've got everything going for me, right? Couldn't understand it.
You understand it now?
I understand, yeah. That for all my life, I'd locked up all these feelings that I didn't know. Like how you said, they eventually find its way out. But I've had all this trauma. Everyone has trauma, whether big, small, everyone goes through trauma. And I suppose I'd put up all these protective walls around me. And then now they're just flooded out. Like I needed help.
How did the trolling online exacerbate, make all of this stuff worse? And like, be honest, we all pretend that doesn't affect us.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so easy when people say, oh, don't read it, forget about it. Like, but when constantly, every day, and yeah, it's my job to sit in front of a camera, but the abuse of, your skin colour, what you're saying, just everything, the pure hatred. And I'm like, what have I done? That was some of what have I done? Like, should I just stop? Because ultimately, I was talking about something that I love. I was just someone that worked super hard to then try and go and get a degree, to get into this world, to get another job, to be able to pay my bills and look after myself. And here I am getting nothing but pure hate and abuse every single day. And I got to stage, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. But why? Like, why should I let them win? So I'm fighting this battle constantly every day with myself.
Did that make it harder to really love showing up at work every day?
No, do you know why? Because like the football cage, the actual work being on screen was an escape. It gave me like an hour and a half where I'm doing Super Sunday. That was an escape. You could forget about everything. It's straight away when I'm going home, once again, then I'm on my own. That's when it all spirals out of control. Like I can't take it. Functional depressive, like at work, I'm totally fine. Put on the walls, like I'm doing the work, enjoying it, loving it. And then straight away, then I can't take it. Hence why most probably I threw myself into more work. didn't give myself time off. Work, because I'm loving doing it. Keep it coming.
It's a distraction though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a distraction from just sitting with oneself and confronting.
Yeah.
I see this so much in so many people I know. This, I'll just make myself so busy that I won't have to actually deal with stuff.
Yeah.
It's almost like I sat here with Maisie Williams, and she'd been through a lot when she was younger, and with her father, Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones, the actor, and she talked about how acting was her escape. And the interesting thing is when we in work and in acting, we kind of get to disassociate from our true self, our identity. Like we become this character. Like even me now.
Yeah.
This is obviously not, I'm being as authentic as I can, but I'm also trying to be a fucking host of a podcast here, right? So like when I go upstairs and I'm on my own, that's my truest self, obviously, when the camera's on or whatever. But it's like our work is our escapism. We're playing, especially when you're presenting, you are, you're high pitched and you're like, So it's funny, I've seen it a lot in some of my really close friends that work is their way of distracting themselves from their life.
Yeah.
Just getting past today.
But you know what, maybe for me, I suppose, maybe I didn't learn that part, because actually what you see on screen is actually me. Like I didn't learn how to either be this presenter or be a different form of myself. So I've always it's just me.
But who's the person at home?
Is the person that had dealt with all this trauma and done stuff, but I hadn't.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, so on TV, there's this expectation for you to be a certain way, right? Which is you've got to be at least, you can't be sat there talking like this.
Yeah.
You've got to be a little bit up, and you've got to be a little bit more interested than maybe you might be feeling. But when you go home on that night in particular, that's probably actually you.
Yeah.
Because there's no one watching. That's when there's no distraction. And I think that sometimes we are who we are when we're least distracted.
Yeah.
When there's no phone, there's no nothing. Go put us in a jungle and sit there for an hour. You'll find out who you are.
Yeah.
So like, when you were alone, and when you are alone, and when there is no distraction, who are you now? Can I ask, are you in a relationship? Because this is quite...
No.
You're not in a relationship.
Okay. I'm dating.
Okay, you're dating. Okay, you're dating. Trying to figure out the
I didn't want to put a label on it. I'm like...
Okay, here we go. Here's the trauma. You don't want to commit. Oh,
yeah.
That's a toxic trait. So you're dating... You're not in a relationship, but you're dating.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just trying to figure out if you're going home alone.
Yes, I'd say yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you like now when you're in that space alone? And what's the journey been like of like being alone, undistracted?
I love it.
Now?
Yeah.
Have you always loved it?
I know what those moments have given me in my life, but maybe because I was clouded by a lot of stuff going on, I was scared to be in those moments. Where actually I think about the best moments that I feel now are my most quiet moments. So I have this special place in Portugal and I always escape to it because I love nothing more than getting up in the morning and going on a hike in nature. And I feel like I'm alive. Like the thoughts that enter my brain about life or what I want to do or where I want to go, like it fills me with so much energy. So I love those moments. I love going away. I go away a lot on my own and people can't get their head around it. Are you going on vacation on your own? I'm like, yeah, because I need it. I know what it gives me. So like I would say those moments I love. I need it to recharge and refocus sometimes.
Were you ever the person that didn't want the party to end or didn't want work to end?
Yeah.
You were that person? Mm-hmm. I had a suspicion you might have been.
I suppose it's my Libra trait, those scales that I love this end. I love connection. I love people, the energy that it gives me. And then I also love the other side of it. I need to be alone sometimes, like not speak, not have the conversation, just literally be in my own thoughts.
I say this because the friends that I've got closest to me that struggled the most with unaddressed issues were always the ones that never, so if, say we're on a night out, a couple of drinks, one or two, I'm like, I'm done. They would always want to continue. And it was this interesting observation that and people listening will know this friend. They do not want people to go home. They do not want they want to have one more drink. And then they have, I think someone's referred to me before as like the fear, either upon sobering up or having to go home alone at the end of the night. Mm-hmm. And I sat here with a guy that kind of explained that to me, but I was just curious if that was ever you at all.
It's not that I would want to. I love nothing more than seeing people have a good time. That in those moments, I often forget that I need to have a good time.
Okay.
Like I'm trying to make everyone have a good time. Do you need a drink? I'm going to go get you a drink. Let's go out for food. Let's do this. I'm planning your biggest thing. And I've never planned anything to celebrate my own stuff, because that's what I love seeing in other people. So it's not a fear of like, I want you to keep staying out or keep giving you a drink. It's just, I'm loving seeing you have a great time. Yeah. And that makes me so happy.
The trolling stuff.
Yeah.
There's nothing more toxic than football Twitter.
Oh, no.
It's just it's like a cesspool of like negativity and anonymity, and everyone's display picture is some footballer from their favorite club, and they just say whatever. People will just say whatever. I just don't post on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same.
What happens on my Twitter, if you look at it, it's just the podcast clip goes out and that's it.
Yeah.
Because you can't fucking...
Yeah.
I don't want to be baited into some shit. But in your job, it's almost part of the job to be on Twitter and to have a voice and to be like, you know, I see it with the pundits like Gary and Jake Humphries and all. It's part of the job to kind of...
I would say it's part of the job for them, but I would say to the extent that what I've gone through with it is maybe they haven't experienced that level. And I think I remember Jake Humphries saying as well, like he hasn't, or he couldn't believe the stuff that was coming my way. And you wouldn't until you're going through it or actually see it. Like, and I suppose I hid it for so long. Like I tried to hide it for so long because I was scared of being seen as being weak, not strong enough to deal with it all.
Did you have anxiety?
Yes, of the fear of what might happen to me to that extent. Like, because the abuse then would turn into death threats also, to the fact is that I am going home alone. You know, what happens there? Like we've seen in the past of, you know, some presenters, what's happened. Stalking, all of that stuff. So all of that anxiety goes through my head. Like I want to just be safe. Like I'm just going to work.
Did you have stalkers?
I wouldn't say stalkers, no. But in terms of the death threats and everything, that's when, and then I suppose that's when I don't tell my mum, don't tell anyone. So actually then I'm dealing with all of this on my own.
Yeah, it's a lot. That day, so the day after you're crying on your bed, you don't know why you're crying.
Yeah.
It's uncontrollable. And you said the next morning you Googled therapy.
Therapy, yeah. Yeah. Do you know what? I laugh because when people had spoken to therapy, I've had conversations about it in the past, like straight away I would screw up my face and be like, well, no one can tell me about myself. I know myself. Like what are they going to do? They don't know about my life. Like that would be the attitude for me for therapy until that day where I Googled it. One, I didn't even know what to look for. All this long list came up of all these different therapies. I'm like, what do I need? I just need to talk to somebody. And then ended up Googling someplace that was close to where I live, went there, and it was everything that I thought therapy would be, like that feeling of someone sitting there and just saying yes and no to me. And I was like, no, this is not going to work for me. Like I'm that person, I need someone to be brutally honest with me. Like just saying yes or no it's not what I need to hear.
Were you scared when you went for that first therapy session? Like you've Googled a place close to you, haven't had a recommendation.
Walking up to some, knocking on some door. Walking up
to a stranger and being like, are you ready?
Yeah. But it's so uncomfortable. And then went home, the same thing. It's like, this is not going to work. Am I going to stay in this dark place? Get out some wine, let's drink, let's numb it all. That experience didn't happen. But then actually then something in my brain was like, no. And then something clicked that I'd heard about this place, Sporting Chance. Actually, I need to reach out to them, see if these people can help me. And then straight away within a day, someone had come back to me saying, we found this guy, go and see him. And the moment, Stephen, I walked into the room with him, I knew he was the guy. He was the person.
How did you know?
How he spoke to me. It was no bullshit. His character. And you know, I almost felt strange is that I've had this strange relationship with men my whole life. But then I actually tend to gravitate back to that kind of form.
Like, and here he was, this big man telling me and making me see myself in a way, pushing me to see myself in a way that maybe I've been scared to do before. And not allowing me to just be like, yeah, I don't want to talk about that. No, yeah, that's okay. And just seeing me and knowing it's not okay.
This was what, 3 years ago, almost 2.5, 3 years ago?
He made me start seeing that some of it isn't my responsibility. The guilt that I'm carrying my whole life, the heaviness, making me see it in all a different way, making me see myself and learn about myself in a different way, why I've done things the way that I have, to understand the patterns, to understand my patterns when I need help, and that it's okay to ask for help. It's not weak. It's not a weakness. Even, we talk about like the heavy stuff, but even it's the nice stuff, wanting someone to say, no, I'm going to pay for this instead of me. Like I'm the first to try and pay for everyone because I just want everyone to be happy. You know, like, oh, I've treated you to a meal, like it's all good. Sometimes that awkward feeling, don't like it. Actually, no, just being like, okay, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that you're going to buy me dinner tonight. You know, it's okay. Learning that.
Why was that a struggle?
Because you just kind of, one, I just hate awkwardness. Or like now I found myself that I can pay my bills and I've, you know, earned some more that I can take care of people also. So I'm trying to take care of you, where actually I'm not earning that money when we're talking about men's football or women's football, even in TV now. Like, I'm earning a salary. So actually, what am I doing? I'm trying to pay for everyone. Like, I'm not made of money. But it's just that feeling that I can treat you like it's good.
I guess if you spend your life like trying to help everybody else and make everyone else happy, it's coming at the cost of something, coming at the cost of your own happiness often. And that is difficult. You're what? You're two and a half years on now. When you reflect back on, you know, that the person you were at 18 years old.
Yeah.
Or in your early, you know, years playing for Arsenal in England. If you could go back and just have a chat with her and she would believe every word you said, what would you say to her?
That you're going to be all right. That you're going to be okay. But at the same time, I almost wouldn't change any of it, because I feel like I've been through so much that has taught me so much. And I'm so grateful for the lessons. So ultimately, I'd tell her that she's going to be okay, but you're going to go through some stuff. But it's going to make you even stronger, but in a different way.
Why would she need to hear those words about you're going to be all right? Because those aren't the words that most people would say to their younger self. Why would young 18-year-old Alex need to hear those words?
Because I suppose it was always just a feeling of fear and worry. So even though things might be going okay in your football career, or, you know, you finally earned some money to pay for something, there's always just, you're living in a worry all the time. So it's able, instead of just rushing on to the next or thinking what next, be more present in that moment. You're going to be okay. So just take it in. I think there's a lot I've not taken in.
Yeah, how do you feel about your career in terms of what you've achieved? Everyone looking at you must think Alex is an unbelievable success. She's smashed everything. She must be just over the moon.
Yeah. I find it hard. I suppose a lot of people do, right? To hear the good stuff. I've done all right. Like, from one career, made it into this career. But I suppose I'm scared to always just sit there, because it can be taken away. It can end. So I'm always thinking, no, I need to be better. My next show,
I need to study my lines. I can't mess up. I need to be better. So there's always that of I'm letting someone down. So I don't think I've ever sat and taken it all in. What have I done? I've managed to play for England. And now I sit on TV and have a conversation. I suppose I don't take it in. When people now come up to me in the street, I understand more, I would say. I didn't understand before, but now I'm starting to understand.
Do you feel like you're a success?
It depends. How do you define success? What does success
get to define
look like?
That's the great thing. Are you a success in your own eyes?
Yes. Not because of my work or that stuff. Goes back to your question that, you know what, I've done okay. From the kid on that council estate that only had the concrete football cage, like, you've managed to do something. When a lot of people, kids from those areas, they have an expectation that you're not supposed to amount to much. So in my eyes, I've been a success for those reasons.
Are you happy?
Yeah. I'm still learning to be more happy, to be honest. I think I've always been kind of happy-go-lucky person. Like, I feed off positivity, want to hear the good things. It's, if you've got an energy sap around you, like it drains me. I'm that sort of person. So I kind of navigate to the people that see life in a certain way and want to have certain conversations. And I'm starting to, look at that and be more happy. Celebrate something. Not big milestones, maybe just little things. It doesn't always have to be the big things, but taking those moments and
If your happiness was this list of ingredients and you looked at it and thought, well, maybe there's one ingredient missing for the recipe to be perfectly balanced, what would that ingredient be?
I would say it's finally accepting love. I think I've always been scared. But like I said, I've been on a journey, not been in relationships for a while. For that reason, I knew that I had to do a lot of work on myself. I've had people come into my life that want to show me love, that want to give it, but I've always had those walls up. No. Well, I think finally now I'm at a stage where I'm ready to let that in. And I think that's something that's been missing from my life.
And what do you want from the next chapter of your life? What is as you look forward and 10 years from now, we say, oh God, that was a successful chapter. Mm-hmm. What happened?
I would say be more present in the moment. Really is. It's weird because I don't ever look 5 years or 10 years. People's in terms of my next job or anything, people are like, well, what show do you want to be presenting in 5 years? I think I've always been, I'm quite spiritual, but I've never, I might have these small goals, but I'm also open to that. Actually, I might go right a bit and I might learn some lessons here to push me in that, or open to that you might have an idea of that's my presenting goal, or I need to be on that show. But actually, because I'm on this path, it might take me a totally different way. And I'm okay with that. Same like the football decision. Do I sign a 2-year contract in my Arsenal career? Or actually, do I listen to how I'm feeling and it's taking me on a totally different path?
I wonder if there's a bit of the survival mindset in there where it's just okay. I hear this a lot. I'm just trying to make sure I don't lose this shit to do my best today. So thinking about the future seems like a waste of energy because I want to make sure that, because there's sometimes a fear in us of going back. And I think people that have come from harder times understand this a little bit more. I think maybe if you'd come from a privileged place, you wouldn't have ever had a fear of what happens if I lose this contract? Because you can just, fall back on the safety net of your parents' mansion or whatever. But there's more of a fight in the moment I see, which ends up, I think, as you've described it, deferring our happiness because we're just trying to get through today. We're not enjoying it. We're just trying to fucking hold on here, Yeah.
Or I'm scared of that. Yeah, a fear of losing that contract. But I also have a fear of standing still. Just being okay, being not just average. I always want to be better than I was yesterday.
But you must have dreams. Big, no?
Yeah, like dreams of, for me, like owning a house in the area that I am now, because I know I love that area.
Yeah.
So it isn't dreams of, like when I went into the TV career, like there's a select group of people that I'm like, God, if I like get into that category, like I know I've done all right. Because that's how I view them, like top class. Same like if we're talking football terms, when you're playing for England, you're the best right back. You know, like I want to be in a category where I see those presenters that you know they are top class. Like, so I suppose I keep working towards trying to be seen at that level. Which I think for me is hard because I don't know, honestly, if I'd be viewed like that.
Why?
Because I already have a perception around me that I've just been given a role. Right? That I'm ticking a box. So I think that perception now for a lot of people, like that's always going to stay with me. No matter how hard I work or have worked to get to where I am, that's kind of a perception.
Makes you upset, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Because I've worked so hard. People can't, they see just sometimes the end process of it, or they don't see the whole process, what's actually taking you to get to that. Which like I'm fine with, but the fact that like, yeah, you're not respected for the work that you're doing or been done, that's hard for me.
When you say people think you're there because you're ticking a box, what box do they think you're ticking?
Female, black, a quota.
But do you carry that?
Yeah. Goes back to another thing that's heavy. It's been heavy. It continues to be every time a subject's brought up, because maybe I've been that first to then break through. It's like I am that spokesperson, or, you know, we'll go to Alex, she needs to speak about this. So yeah. it's just always there, always. And it's like as if it's become it's me, it's my story. And I'm like, no, there's a whole lot to me, you know, going on in my life. I'm not just being trolled. But that's how now people would either just see me or all the abuse, or, yeah, it's just...
I didn't see you like that.
Thanks.
Didn't even write down trolling on here. I didn't. was completely irrelevant to obviously who you are. So it's interesting that you're carrying that in your mind, but it didn't cross my mind today. I didn't even think we were going to talk about it today. I don't consider it to be part of your story.
Thank you.
Not even saying that to make you happy. Like, if no. I just didn't think it's not anything to do with you, is it? It's actually someone else's problem in every sense of the word.
I suppose it's when you're getting phone calls every day about that, or straight away, that's constantly every thing that you read online. Yeah. It's that.
Yeah. There's this interesting thing when you represent an unrepresented community, that it ends up becoming like your personal brand. So like, as you've said, oh, we need to talk about black issues or women issues in football. So microphone over to, and it's, that's on one hand the right thing to do, because other people shouldn't really be speaking on those issues. But in another way, it's kind of the wrong thing to do, because it pigeonholes you it reduces your identity, as you've said, down to just like black woman, when you are so much more. Everyone else is allowed to be so much more.
Yeah.
But people don't really think about that. They think they're being kind or thoughtful or considerate.
Do you know what? I suppose, like, in terms of, there's parts that I find it hard because, like I said before, I also understand my responsibility more with it. Where before it was I was just finding a job. I'm just sitting on a sofa having a conversation like, oh, this is great. Actually, what I didn't understand, me sitting on a BBC One show sofa, or a flagship programme for BBC, is actually doing for a lot of people. I didn't understand that until maybe there was one time that I'm riding back through East London. It's actually during the pandemic. I'd rode from like North London to East London to see my mum, and riding home there was two black women on a park bench, and they were shouting at me, Stephen. And I was like, well, what's going on here? What's going on? And they were like
family.
Yeah, basically pure joy that they'd seen me.
Yeah.
And they just told me, keep going. Nothing more. And I was like, wow. It's amazing, touched me. Yeah. Because of all the stuff you see online, those two people on that park bench I understood what I'm doing.
What's your relationship like these days with your father?
I don't speak to him.
When was the last time you spoke to him?
2019. And it wasn't a conversation, it was a text message. The last time I'd actually spoken to him was my nan's funeral in 2017. I remember standing on the balcony in Wapping. It had some drink, but him telling me that he knows he's not been the person that he should have been, and he's carried a lot of regrets, and he's going to change. And I was already so distraught because my nan was one of the closest people in my life. But I remember just feeling like, I don't care. If you do, then great. I'd spent my whole life sending him Christmas presents, birthday presents, ringing him just to check in because I had this guilt that he would be lonely And then from that moment, I was like, nah, I'm done. Like, I didn't hear from him, so I'm not going to chase him. Like, once again, it was just that. It's just all talk. Like, I'm over it. And then I was doing Strictly in 2019 and I got to Blackpool. Strictly was like this bubble of happiness that at a stage I just needed it, and it gave me that. Strictly did. And then I remember I got to Blackpool and I was on the train on the way up, sitting next to Michelle Visage, who's this character who I'd never thought I'd have someone in my life like her. And here I am, opposite ends. She's from New York, but we just had this connection. She was my person on Strictly. And she saw my phone flash and she's like, what the heck? What's that? She must have seen something in my face. And it was a message from my dad asking for tickets to come to Blackpool. I hadn't heard from him the 10 weeks I was on the show. And he asked for tickets. Not for him though, for two of his friends where he lives. And you know what? I'd seen the Elton John film and I remember crying in the movie theatre because there was a part in that I was like, geez, that's how I feel. There was a part, Elton John, he was just trying to connect with his dad the whole time. And then there was one point where the dad reached out to him and was like, come round for dinner or something. And when he turned up, it was literally just for him to sign autographs. So there was no love, or he didn't really want him to be. It was just to sign autograph for the kids he had around the house. And that's how I felt in that moment. Like, it wasn't, you didn't care about me or ask how I was. All you want is Strictly tickets for your mates. But I remember I had the courage to finally write back to him, that's wrong. And I think it must have touched him in a way because I'd never done that. Like, if I was mad or felt angry about anything, would never tell my dad because I always still had that fear. And so he must have known. And then straight away you text back apologising that, oh no, it was just his way to try and connect with me to ask for tickets and they were really for him. And I was just like, oh, this is just bullshit. And then so I've not spoken to him since. But I'm going to have to. And I want to speak to him.
You're not finished talking?
No. It's on one hand, like, I've done this book to free my mum. On the other hand, I'm scared that it could ruin my dad's life. And I don't want that. So I need to pluck up some courage. Because, yeah, I need to tell him that I've wrote about stuff that's not going to be comfortable for him.
We sit here on the 9th of September.
Yeah.
Book comes out in 10 days from now, on the 19th of September. Are you thinking of speaking to him before the publication or after the publication? Or?
No, before. I think it would be very wrong if it's just out there and I hadn't spoken to him. Like, I've not wrote the book. I didn't write it to destroy his life or make him seem like this person. And I truly hope he's not that person anymore. Like, people change. So I don't want him to be judged on that in the past. Like, I want people to take him for who he is now. So I want him to understand that I've not wrote it from a place of being angry with him, or that ultimately it's not about him. It's about wanting my mum to break free of it all.
Scary.
What are you thinking?
I was just thinking a few things. I was thinking it's a difficult conversation and I've got to be honest, there's a part of me that thinks, you don't owe him that. This is my, look, it's not none of my business, but there's a part of me that thinks you don't owe him that. As you said, it's your story. And it'll impact people you love, of course. And then I think you have the right to speak on your own experiences, regardless of how that might make someone else who's played that kind of role in your life feel. I just don't know. That's easy for me to say. He's not my dad. But that was what I was thinking.
I think, that's gone back and forth in my mind. Like, I don't need to, right? He's not been there in my life. I would say you sitting there, having this conversation with me, you know me better than my dad. Like, he doesn't know anything about me. Can't describe me as a person. Doesn't really know what's gone on in my life. Doesn't know. So yeah, I don't owe him that. But it's, I don't know, something in me is telling me it's the right thing to do for him. Like, it's my dad, I love him.
Did you ever understand the cycle that he's in that made him the way he is?
No. And I think that's where I always think that something, like, he must feel the guilt and the sadness, and that's why I've always, like, there's a good person in there. Like, something's gone on that's made him feel like this, or I don't know if it's me just making up a story in my head. But I feel like I always saw that from a kid. Like, everyone has good in them, I'm still trying to pluck up the courage. It's coming around soon. I've got to do it. Yeah. I will do it.
You finished this book by writing a letter to your mother.
Yeah. That was hard in the audiobook, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I spent that whole chapter crying.
Why did you want to end the book in that way?
Because I hope the book shows her that I am me because of her. That she's an incredible woman. Everything that she's done has allowed me to be in the position that I am. And for her to understand that she doesn't have to be the strong one anymore. Like, I'll do everything to look after her and just to enjoy her life. Like, she still has this life. You don't need to be trapped by the past anymore. She's still trapped by it. That, yes, like me taking her out for dinner or a theatre show, like, to try and give her that happiness. Like, I can only do so much. Like, I'm hoping that letter sets her free. That's why. Stop looking at me. I don't want to cry anymore.
Where am I going to look? No, yeah. It's beautiful what you write about her, and it's actually difficult to read it because it's so beautiful and it comes from such an authentic place. So thanks. I can't imagine what it's like having to say it in a booth into a microphone when you're doing the audiobook. I can't imagine. Even reading the words were just so, you could feel that the words were so intentional. Every word you selected in that letter is so intentional. So it's moving for someone that has never met your mother, but
thank you.
What an amazing daughter she has raised.
Thank you. Do you know, it does actually make me smile. Going back to one of your questions about, I don't know, being proud, or like even seeing you just have that book, like, that's my book.
Yeah.
Like, I wrote my own book. Like, I didn't even go to school. Like, education, it was a struggle. Yeah. Dyslexic, the speech, like, they're all there, all the problems in my life. But I actually just sat down on my laptop and wrote that book. And like, you've got it there. Like, I don't know, it still doesn't feel real. But I'm just like, yeah, I did that.
You did that.
I did that.
Alex, we do have a closing tradition on this podcast.
Yep.
Which is where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest. and they don't know who they're writing it for.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You will also be asked to do the same, which is leave a question for the next guest. And again, you won't know who that guest is. And I don't get to read it until the very end of the podcast. So, okay, it's very, very easy to read. What is your deepest fear?
Oh, that is a good one.
At the very core of you, what is your deepest fear?
I think my deepest fear is my mum leaving this world and not experiencing happiness. That is the fear. So much. Do you need more from me?
No, I was just thinking about it. It makes sense because you've explained it. You've explained it that you've seen this kind of numbness in your mum to the world, and it feels like you've been fighting to try and solve that.
Yeah.
And as you've said, this book is part of the solution in your eyes to liberate her from that.
I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to smile more, taking moments and just not think something's going to happen. Just for her to have some happiness.
Do you think she has to go and walk some of the same steps that you've walked in terms of therapy and going back to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how hard that's going to be for her, because you're going to bring up the rawness, the stuff that she's tried to push to the side. But ultimately, I know it can free her.
But she has to have a willingness.
Hopefully. I think there's a power in there, isn't there? I think this is what I hope. When I keep saying about, I hope the book sets her free, because I know there's so many people that have gone through the same stuff as my mum. And I think maybe if she understands that and sees that they're free or they've come through things, that maybe she can start to be on that journey. So there's a huge fear, the answer to the question, but ultimately I look forward, and when I look forward, I see there's a light, and I feel that's where I smile, because I'm just hoping and I pray that that's where she gets to.
Alex, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. You're a wonderful person, and I know this is just the start of our relationship. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, someone get me a tissue.
I'll tear up if I talk about it, because things were going well in my life, and then one day just crack, everything came crashing down. And I've learned that friendship is super powerful. I had people descending on my home to be with me. You know, one day I just look up and Lex is in the room, and they sat with me, picked me up, and they reminded me who I am. And, you know, I've just such immense gratitude for that.
Dr. Andrew Huberman is a world-renowned neuroscientist, Stanford professor, and podcaster.
Revolutionizing how we understand the brain
and how we can adopt change, break bad habits, and achieve peak performance.
Growing up, I was scared, depressed, and confused. My parents split up. I was getting in multiple fights. I found myself locked up in this residential treatment program. And I realized that I need to take control of my life.
I'm so intrigued by that, because so many people feel stuck in their lives. So how does someone even make those life-changing decisions?
Well, there are so many zero-cost tools that can change your brain. We can go through all of them. So
I want to talk about dopamine in this graph.
the dopamine is kind of like a wave pool in every domain of life, whether or not it's food, exercise. For some people, it's work or sex. If you push things to the max, you're going to feel depleted and understimulated afterwards, and you need so much more energy to get the same output. And when you're in that dopamine depleted state, typically what people do is they try and access things that are going to reactivate the dopamine circuitry, and all it does is drive them further and further into that trough.
So how do you fix that?
So it's hard to exit, but start with.
This is a sentence I never thought I'd say in my life. We've just hit 7 million subscribers on YouTube, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of you that show up here every Monday and Thursday to watch our conversations. From the bottom of my heart, but also on behalf of my team, who you don't always get to meet. There's almost 50 people now behind the Diary of a CEO that worked to put this together. So from all of us, thank you so much. We did a raffle last month, and we gave away prizes for people that subscribed to the show up until 7 million subscribers. And you guys loved that raffle so much that we're going to continue it. So every single month, we're giving away money can't buy prizes, including meetings with me, invites to our events, and £1,000 gift vouchers to anyone that subscribes to the Diary of a CEO. There's now more than 7 million of you. So if you make the decision to subscribe today, you can be one of those lucky people. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Let's get to the conversation.
Andrew, at the very heart of what you do, at the very, very heart, if I looked at all that you've produced and I had to encapsulate it into just one or two sentences that encapsulates your mission statement, what would that be?
I want to share the beauty and utility of biology. I want people to understand how incredible the human body and brain are, and how even a small understanding of the underlying mechanisms about how we interact with light or temperature, exercise, thoughts, emotions, etc., how that can impact our health in really powerful ways.
You have become a cultural phenomenon because of the information that you've shared. In your view, why and how has that happened? I guess maybe most importantly, why has that happened? What is it that you've kind of catered to that was absent in people's understanding of themselves?
Well, I think people are intensely curious about themselves, meaning our species, why we feel the way we feel, why other people feel and act the way they do. And I think most everybody, I like to think, is deeply interested in how to be the best version of themselves. And I think what I've done is I've provided a lens into all of that through biology, through neuroscience in particular, but also I'm a practitioner. So since I was pretty young, I've been actively involved in sports and psychology and interested in what one can do, in some cases take, things to avoid in order to be the best version of oneself. And so I'm an academic, right? I have a laboratory and I'm a tenured faculty member at Stanford, although I should mention that I've shrunk my laboratory considerably in the last year or so. But I've done experiments on animal models, on humans and human clinical trials. So I have the understanding and expertise of a research scientist. And at the same time, I think very deeply about how to translate the information in these peer-reviewed papers, how to translate the information in the fields of science and medicine into actionable, what we call protocols. And I do my best to distill things down into, actionable things. But I'm not a big believer in dumbing things down. I decided to go the opposite way. Rather than give little snippets, 90-second videos, we include those, but rather I decided to go for full 1 to 3 hour, maybe even 4 hour lectures on a topic, because I believe, and I'm not the first to say it, that people have near infinite ability to learn if they are told things in a way that's clear. So I believe that people want to understand, they can understand, and it doesn't require decorating things in a lot of complicated language. Sometimes we need to include some complicated language just because that's the way science and medicine are, and that people are willing to learn that and carry that along. And once they understand how they work a little bit better, you arm them with a little bit of knowledge, then really they're just off to the races and the rest takes care of itself.
I may a couple of times today just ask you to explain something to me in more simpler terms, because I don't have any fundamental understanding of science. So much of my objective is just to be completely honest if I don't understand something, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that also probably don't understand something. One of the things that was most surprising to me about you was your background. And I think the interesting thing about your background and where you came from and the struggles you faced, and in contrast to the man that sits in front of me today, I think it speaks to one of the fundamental points of curiosity that I have about your work, which is it's all well and good knowing protocols, but there's something else required to be able to pursue them. Now, people say that this is discipline or motivation or whatever it might be. But when I looked at your background and where you've come from, it wasn't a straight line. There's an element of transformation that's gone on there. There's almost the early Andrew Huberman, who I never would have guessed would have been the man that is almost unrecognizable from the man sat in front of me today. And then there's the man sat in front of me today. And the reason I'm so fascinated by that is because if I can understand how you went from that Andrew Huberman to this one, it liberates me from the excuses that I won't be able to pursue your protocols now.
Yeah, well, certainly there's been a lot of adventure and transformation, certainly some hardship. And listen, I'll be the first to say, my life has been easier than it has been for others and harder than it has been for others, right? So I'm not trying to plant a flag as having had the hardest or the easiest life. I only know what's my experience, right? So all I've got is my experience, my knowledge, and my words to convey that. But yeah, it was not a linear path. I would say the kind of key milestones along the way and the relevant pieces are, for as long as I can remember, I've always had an intense curiosity and an intense desire for adventure. So I want to learn, and I want to learn firsthand. I also suppose I've always had an intensity, like I've been told since I was a young kid. I sort of like forward leaning a little bit, forward center of mass, so to speak. But yeah, my childhood on the one hand was very conventional and very sweet in the sense that, I had two parents. My dad's actually a scientist. He's a theoretical physicist by training. He's Argentine, but then did his graduate training in the United States. My mother's a writer, and she was a teacher. She didn't work a whole lot when we were kids. She was mostly focused on raising us. And my childhood, to my memory, was marked by, dinners together at the table. I was very, very interested in all things biology, in particular fish. So all things aquaria, birds, anything that, tropical birds, I would learn all about them, learn about fish. I would then lecture about these things in class on Monday as a way to try and get me to not talk to students around me, because I'd be telling them about it otherwise. So I've been giving little lectures since I was a kid. And then I suppose as I matured, so to speak, around adolescence, my parents split up. It was a very high conflict divorce. And that sent me in the direction of more kind of wilder foraging, let's call it that. I was a bit feral. Just the circumstance led to a situation where I was seeking out sports and friends for which there wasn't any parental involvement. So for me, the immediate attraction was to skateboarding and punk rock culture. And so I was very fortunate that I was drawn into skateboarding and punk rock culture in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm 49 now, or almost 49. And at that time, that was a very nascent culture. There was no X Games, there were no major sponsors, that sort of thing. And so there were all these, not parentless, but rather feral kids. Some were parentless. And I got to be exposed to some incredible skateboarding. And I was not a particularly good skateboarder, but I certainly had the drive to try and do it. I kept hurting myself. So that was actually an important event. I kept, hurting my body, trying to push myself to get really good. Friends of mine were getting sponsored. A close friend of mine got picked up as a pro while we were in high school. We were traveling, going to contests. What you probably may have noticed is there wasn't a lot of attending school. So I don't recommend this to young people. Stay in school, at least at the early stage, get that basic education while your brain is still hyperplastic. But I was exposed to, and fortunately did not partake in, a lot of drugs and violence, but I saw that. I also saw a lot of incredible skateboarding. Some of these people went on to start huge companies and do incredible things in the realm of action sports. So like DC, I know the guys that started that, Danny Way, Colin McKay, I knew at that time, I wasn't close with, but Tony Hawk, watched his ascent, right? He was a few years ahead of me. But I would attend contests, skating contests. So I was in this world where it was all DIY. It was all self-created. Now, at some point, I got a girlfriend and got into other things and kind of left skateboarding. Thought I might be a firefighter for a little while. I was always very physical.
What age is this?
So I was 16 when I got my first girlfriend, and I wasn't doing well in skateboarding. I kept breaking my foot. People were moving on without me. That was just the nature of it. I was in love with her, wanted to spend time with her. And so I thought, well, I'm not really doing well in school. I'm not really attending school. Man, I'll need to work and take care of us. I was really thinking kind of like an adult at that point in terms of what I would do. And so I thought I'd get into the fire service. So I started trying to strengthen my body. I started doing resistance training. Keep in mind, back then, the only people that lifted weights were, preseason American football players, people going to the military, and bodybuilders. And I wasn't interested in any of those three things. But I started doing resistance training and realized, wow, like this is a really powerful tool. I can make my body stronger through work. I couldn't do a single pull-up when I started. I was always pretty skinny. I, shot up a full foot in height, but was very, very skinny, at that point. And within, a summer, I could do pull-ups. I could do these things. I thought, wow, like there's this remarkable relationship between doing physical effort and kind of ability or outcome. And then I also started running a lot. For whatever reason, I ran cross country my senior year of high school. And also there, I felt like there was a direct relationship between effort and outcome. If I ran further, then the next time I could run even further. If my lungs burned on a hill run, well, then the next time I could do that hill without my lungs burning. Whereas in skateboarding, no matter how hard I seemed to try, I just couldn't match the level of effort with the outcome. So it was from that point forward that, 16 years old forward, that I made running and resistance training just part of my regular weekly schedule. What ended up happening was she went off to college. I ended up just basically living in my car or her dorm room while she was off at college. She was a year ahead of me. And I realized I wanted to be near her. So I applied to college and somehow got in. By the end of my freshman year, I had been getting in multiple fights. So I still had that kind of wildness from the world I was previously in. I was getting into physical altercations. I was never into drugs or alcohol. That was fortunate. I don't have a propensity to be addicted to those things. But my life really wasn't in order. And it was actually nearly 30 years ago to the day. It was July 4th, 1994. I went to a barbecue. I got into an altercation with a bunch of people that were robbing the house that we were at. And by the way, there's sort of a little tangent side story. One of my friends in college, we weren't super close, but my girlfriend at the time had lived with the now wife of Jack Johnson, the musician. Mm-hmm. So Jack recalls that party. We have other friends from that party. That was kind of a meaningful day for me because I got into this altercation. Everything turned out okay in the sense that, we got our belongings back. No one was badly hurt. But I remember going back to the place where I was staying at that time and thinking to myself, okay, this is bad, right? I'm, like 19 years old, or I guess it was just shy of 18. I am not doing well in school. My freshman year was a disaster where I went to college. I don't think I flunked out, but it just wasn't really attending class. I wasn't doing well. I'm getting in physical altercations. I'm working at this little bagel shop delivering bagels, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not much of a future in it for me. I didn't end up going to the fire service. I didn't end up a professional athlete. And I thought, what am I going to do what am I going to do, right? Because the story of whatever happened to me prior to that was kind of meaningless unless I made something of myself. So that day, I actually wrote myself and my parents a letter saying that I was going to turn my life around. And I actually still have this letter. My mother still has this letter. And what I decided to do was to take a leave of absence from university. I didn't drop out. A leave of absence allows you the option to go back. I moved home and I worked. So I was a busboy at a little restaurant in town where I grew up. And I still continue to run and do resistance training, 3 times a week each or so. And I went to community college, which is typically where kids who can't afford to go to university or kids that just stay back for whatever reason. It's a wonderful aspect of the educational system in California still. And I made learning and filling my mind with formal, rigorous coursework-based knowledge my absolute mission. Now, I didn't care if I liked it. It's like, I'm going to trust my ability to learn, because I could tell you a lot about tropical fish, skateboarding, punk rock music, a fair amount about physical training. At that point, I sought out the right people. This has always been something I've been good at, is seeking out the right people with knowledge. So I got great knowledge from the late Mike Menser, who had trained Darian Yates. I was reading every book I could on physical fitness and rehabilitation, trying to get my body strong. Never wanted to be big. You know, I was always interested in being strong and being able to run far and fast. That was always the goal, like a capability. I've not been one of the people to like really care about like hypertrophy. That wasn't something that mattered to me. If some came along as a consequence of training, great, but it was more about a capability to do things. So at that point, I just became a voracious learner. I took every bit of energy that I had applied to these other areas and put them into learning math, science, art history, English, literature, whatever, you know, coursework was thrown at me. And then after a year of that, went back to university, lived alone in a studio apartment, and basically for the remaining portion of university, all I did was study, work out, hang out with my girlfriend, run, listen to, at that time, like early 90s punk rock music, which is still a wonderful genre. So mainly like Rancid, Operation Ivy, Bob Dylan, always loved Bob Dylan, classical music when I study, and that was it. I didn't do anything else. And at that point, I started getting straight A's. People didn't recognize me. They're like, aren't you the guy from freshman year that was getting in all these fights? I will admit that I wasn't completely devoid of the typical college phenotype. Once a month, I would allow myself to go out to a party, and I'd party once a month. But stayed away from drugs was never my thing. And so drank, which, you know, eventually I realized wasn't my thing either. But I was just completely committed. So I graduated university with honors. I went to graduate school, did a master's up at UC Berkeley, then did my PhD, did my postdoc at Stanford, and then eventually got a laboratory, first at UC San Diego, excellent neuroscience program, eventually was recruited to Stanford with tenure, and all along maintaining physical fitness in the background, focusing very heavily on doing primary research, meaning making discoveries in neuroscience and publishing papers. And then in 2019, I decided to start posting science on Instagram, just really nerdy stuff. No protocols, just telling people about sunlight and the relationship to the eye, dopamine, and I just enjoyed talking about it, just like I did when I was a little kid, telling people about tropical fish. And in 2020, my plan was to release a book. So I got a PR guy, his name is Rob Moore, he's now a close friend of mine, and we were talking about how we would, I don't know, maybe go on podcasts or do something of that sort when the book came out, and then the pandemic hit. And I said, you know what, let's pause the book. And he said, well, let's just maybe go on podcasts. So that year, 2020, I went on, I think somewhere between 20 and 30 podcasts. No book, no website, no nothing, just like talking science, and delighted in that. And then January 2021, I got a little place in a little kind of canyon region of Los Angeles, a little sabbatical-like retreat, and set up some cameras. Had my bulldog Costello there. Rob Moore became my podcast producer. And on January 1st, more or less, we launched the Huberman Lab podcast, where now I still just blab about stuff that I find interesting and that I think can be useful to people. So that's the kind of, that's the arc. And as I tell all this, I also just want to make sure that people know that it sounds like this magnificent arc, but along the way, there were absolutely times when I thought, oh, like, what am I going to do? Like, this is working, but this isn't working. And my life at times became very lopsided. I focused mainly on work and research. You know, I'm 49 years old now. I've had some wonderful relationships across my life, but I opted to delay on marriage and family as a way to, well, it wasn't the intention, but as a way to really just continue to pour my energy into the things that I was most passionate about. So there's always sacrifice. There were, you know, sadly, I've lost a lot of friends along the way, to some to drugs and alcohol, suicide, depression, and so on. Others to just unfortunate consequences or age. But I think the major themes have been, I just simply can't pull myself off a desire to learn and adventure through a particular space. And then once I learn things, and as I learn things, I can't seem to help but just tell everybody about it. You know, provided there's somebody there to listen, then I'm eager to share what I learned.
It's funny in life how some of the most traumatic things that happen to us, and trauma is such a subjective thing. So what's trauma for me is not for Francis Ngannou, who I've heard his story, and, you know, walking out of Africa and jumping over barbed wire and walking across the Sahara Desert.
His is an amazing
I just can't, you know, it's like...
I hear he's a very nice guy.
He's exceptionally nice. He's a wonderful individual. But I'm really interested in how our traumatic experiences end up dragging us in whatever shape in life, dragging us or making us driven. That it's almost two sides of the same coin sometimes. But I just wanted to zoom back in on when you were younger, because I was reading about at sort of 14, 15 years old, you were put into a residential treatment program?
I was. So one day in school, and by the way, I wasn't in school much, and if I was there, I was the kid with the hoodie on and his head on the table, you know, just kind of like sleeping or drawing, or I was not tuned into what I should have been tuned into. I was, looking back, I think I was depressed, I was sad, I was confused by the fracture of my family. And listen, divorce and family reorganization can take place without all that. Unfortunately, this was a very complicated situation. And maybe it was also puberty combined with general confusion about life. Those things combined to, you know, put me in a state that I think, looking back, I was scared, depressed, and confused, like a lot of young people happen to be at that age. So a number of things happened. I was getting into trouble. I wasn't attending school. I was truant a lot. And yeah, one day they came to like get me. They basically called me into the office. I was sitting there talking to the school counselor. It wasn't my first time doing that. And then some other people showed up there, and I started to realize, like, uh-oh, I think I know what this is, which was they were going to take me away. Now, the exact stimulus for all this, whether or not a friend, I think I know who it was, had been concerned about me and had intervened, or whether or not it was purely from the parent side, isn't clear to me still. I have my theories, so they have theirs. But in any event, I soon after found myself in a residential treatment program. And it was interesting because it was the first time that I had ever had my freedom taken away from me. You know, that was an experience, like doors go locked and you're like, whoa, you know, like,
what is it?
My freedom taken away. Well, you're locked in a treatment program, basically. You know, these were all kids that were delinquent or had problems of various sorts. So you're on a hallway with a bunch of other kids. You know, you're staying there at night. You're not leaving. You're not free to leave. And they make you do group therapy. You have to do one-on-one therapy. You have an hour to exercise outside. You're not leaving the grounds. Yeah, this is like a combination of like, if you were to just sort of merge in your mind, like youth detention and hospital, right? Yeah, that's kind of the unity of these. Now, kids there, and we were kids, right? And there was a unit of much younger kids, and there was a unit of people much older than us. And I'll never forget what they said. One of the counselors there said to us, listen, the kids over there, the younger ones, and the adults over there, they're crazy. You guys, you're not crazy. You just have problems. And I'll never forget, one of the kids that was in there with me goes, yeah, but that's exactly what they're telling the people in the other two units. So pretty quickly I realized, like, this place is problematic. And I was scared. I won't forget, like, my roommate, who turned out to be a very kind person, but he looked like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. And he had a cutting problem. And he was like a scary looking guy. But as I got to know him, I realized that he was just a kid with a lot of problems, different than mine, but a lot of problems. So you're in there with kids with severe drug issues, with some were suicidal, some weren't, some had aggression issues. It was a co-ed unit. During the day, obviously you're housed, you know, it was boys with boys, girls with girls. And after about 2-3 days, I realized, okay, the only way out of here is to do the work. So I did the work. I sat down and I started, for the first time, really talking about what was going on for me and listening. You can learn a lot in those places by listening to what's going on for other people. And I realized that a lot of what was going on internally for me had to do with the fact that, I mean, what do we need? We basically need safety and acceptance at some level. From parents, we also need guardrails. And at that time, I was lacking all three. And I think, my inherent intensity, and I'm a pretty, I'm not an emotional person in the sense that I don't emote easily, but I'm a very feeling person. I feel a lot. I don't know how other people perceive me, but I feel a lot. And I think what was happening in my family unit at that time felt devastating. And I missed my sister. She was off in college. She had gone off to college. I've always been really close with my sister. And really, because this was like this was late 80s, early 90s, I also didn't know many people from homes without, a mom and dad, this kind of thing. And I had been exposed to a lot already. That one of the beautiful things about skateboarding, at least back then, it's different now, is that it was completely self-organized. So whenever I could, I would get a ride with a friend or take the bus up to San Francisco. There was this now famous / infamous scene, the Embarcadero Plaza, it's called EMB, was this kind of self-organized place. You have these in major cities elsewhere. There was Love Park in Philadelphia, you had Washington Square Park in New York. And back then, I learned a lot from the older, it was mostly guys then. Now there's more women in skateboarding, girls and women in skateboarding, and they rip, they're so good. But back then it was mostly guys. And so I learned all sorts of things there, some of which, I was far too young to learn. I got basically a street education from kids that weren't going to school and who were just like living this wild, free life. And I do want to be clear that even though there were, let's call them untoward elements, there was also an incredible beauty. And my friend Jake Rosenberg started going up there as well. He had his own challenges that I only learned about later. And he brought a video camera, high-8 video. He started filming the now just truly iconic videos of Mike Carroll. These names will mean things to Henry Sanchez, like Mark Gonzalez. So he just started filming all this, and then he made the first Plan B videos, and he made the Waiting for Lightning documentary about Danny Way, jumping the Great Wall of China. And our friend Mike Blayback, who's the photographer for the Huberman Lab podcast of all things, who became one of the most iconic action sports portrait photographers, was a kid who basically drove out from Michigan. I don't even know if he graduated high school, something, he probably did. And then he slept in the clothing stacks at the Gap store, hung out in Embarcadero and took photos. And those photos and those videos that Mike and Jacob and other people took are now iconic in skateboarding. And so I was also exposed to this incredible world of DIY, like take your passion, take your circumstance, and pick a craft and just document stuff. And so in many ways, what happened at Embarcadero and what happened in skateboarding, and I always loved punk rock music and going to shows. I have no musical talent, and I didn't suck at skateboarding, but I wasn't going to go anywhere with it. But what I saw was, if you love something and you want to learn as much as possible about it, and you love the culture around it, you do have to learn how to sort out the untoward elements. Don't get yourself into trouble. But you take that energy, and I just took it to academics. I remember realizing when I got to graduate school, I found a wonderful lab to work in with a wonderful woman named Barbara Chapman. Unfortunately, she passed away. And at the time, she said, listen, I'm going to have a couple kids, but we have grants. You can, so she said, I'm going to have a couple kids, so I'm going to be very busy, but we have grants, and here's the lab. She said, don't burn the lab down, don't hurt yourself, but just do experiments, have fun. And I realized, I was like, this is the best. And I had so much energy, and I thought, I never have to go home. So I lived there a lot of the time, brush my teeth in the sink there, work out at the gym, go shower, come back. And I remember people saying, you're going to burn out. What are you doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I would work 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. I was so happy. And I realized this is the exact same feeling. I'm just taking my interest and I'm just pouring myself into it. I did that when I was a graduate student. I did it when I was a postdoc. And actually when I was a postdoc, I started writing some music articles for Thrasher magazine. I've always kept some little tie to the skateboarding industry that way, just to make some extra cash. And then when I was a junior professor, I had to really pour myself just into the laboratory, but it still worked out. And I guess the point is that, earlier you and I were talking about if you have, and I'm borrowing in this phrase from one of my heroes, Martha Beck, who's a wonderful person and teacher, such wisdom, and she calls it a interest-based attention system. Some people might call it ADHD, but have you ever noticed that even people, and we know this from the scientific literature, people, kids, adults with ADHD, when they're in so-called ADHD, when they are doing something they really love, they're like a laser. They're not going to peel off that. Their attention is like level 11 out of 10. So I took that energy that I've always had in me for fish, for tropical birds, skateboarding, punk rock music, eventually it was biology. And I just went, okay, here are my chips. I'm all in. But the goal has always been and remains to take what I learn and share it. Because the real joy in doing anything, for me anyway, is the ability to share in that knowledge or in that experience. And so those early years were really choppy and really dangerous, frankly. But then when I started a laboratory and decided, hey, I'm going to study human stress, let's go get VR of stressful circumstances. And my friend Michael Muller, who's a very accomplished portrait photographer in Hollywood and also takes photos of great white sharks out of cages, he said to me, oh, your VR stimulus in your lab, here's what he told me. He's like, it sucks. He said, it sucks. It doesn't look real. It's all CGI. It's not scary at all. How about we, go film some great white sharks down in Guadalupe Island and we leave the cage? And, the young Andrew was like, okay. So got dive certified, went and did it 1 year, stayed in the cage, went the next year, exited the cage. I'm not recommending people live this way. I'm not, because I had an air failure at depth the second year while I was in the cage. I bailed out, I made it, I lived, but it was super scary. And it was not an experience I want to repeat. And I realized, that's the line. Like the great Oliver Sacks, another hero of mine, British trained neurologist and author, he wrote, was basically what became the script for Awakenings and things like that. There's a quote about him that resonates a lot. And the quote, I think, is, an early teacher of his said, Oliver will go far, provided he does not go too far. And so, you have to be careful, right? These adventures, leaving school, you can't be haphazard about it. So if you look at the broad arc, it's highly nonlinear, but there's a common thread through all of it, which is this desire to learn, curiosity, desire to share, intensity. And when I'm involved in any one thing, and I recommend that if people are involved in any one thing, if it's podcasting or sport or video games or math or AI or program, whatever it is, skateboarding, whatever it is, that you can't be haphazard in that world, because forward progress, even if you change things over time, is the consequence of taking that inherent uniqueness that we each have and whatever level of intensity we have and making sure that you do take steps forward. And what I've learned is, as a child, as an adolescent, and as an adult, there are all these traps along the way. There are all these chutes down to failure and destruction, and you have to be very, very thoughtful. And so you can't be reckless.
I'm really compelled as well by the letter you sent to your parents.
Yeah, they must have been very surprised. That letter was written in a house on a little street in a little town called Isla Vista, on Pasado Street, where I'd essentially been squatting for the summer with my ferret. I tell you that because that was the picture. I had a ferret, her name was Iris, that my first girlfriend, who had left me by then because she was smart, because I had nothing going on. Me and Iris were living together. I didn't even have a bed in the place. I thought, well, why pay rent? Like no one where I had grown up with all these like riffraff kids. Now the town, to be clear, the town I grew up in, Palo Alto, now is known as like one of the wealthiest places. At that time I was like kind of upper middle class. But when I say like riffraff kids, I mean like the people that congregated around skateboarding in the late 80s, early 90s were the kind of like parentless feral types. So I learned a lot. I learned I can sleep mummy style anywhere. In a car, in a van, in a corner. So like, why pay rent? That summer, I'd have more money to keep and save if I just like got a pillow and a couple blankets and a sleeping bag. And this little place, I was living there with my ferret. And I came back from that fight on July 4th. And I thought, okay, like this is it. And I think it was by the end of the weekend, I'd written out this letter that said essentially the following. It said, look, I don't know why you guys decided to just fracture everything. I understood why my parents didn't want to be together. They were incompatible. By the way, they're both happily married now to wonderful people for many years. So there's a happy ending there. But at the time I was very confused. It wasn't that I needed them to be together, but the level of friction in their separation was just like, I felt like a lot of it fell on me. And there are reasons for that. But I basically forgave them. I basically said, listen, I forgive you. I realized that I need to take control of my life. I was 18, so I'm a fall baby. So it was like I was almost 19. I'm, 18 years old, 19 years old, and I need to do something with my life. And the only way I'm going to do that is by getting super focused and super organized. So I somehow had the idea to externalize this. And then I wrote essentially the same letter to myself. And then I just, as my girlfriend, who eventually got back together with me, that was interesting. As soon as I started working hard in school, I'll never forget what she said. We're still friendly. She's married with her own family and they have a beautiful family. But every once in a while, I'll hear from her and I will never forget what she said to me about a year later when I was just absolutely rabid about learning. She said, you've become a monster. And I was like, a monster? And she's like, yeah, a monster of learning and class and getting up early and you tuck your shirt in. Like I got into this whole thing of like dressing the opposite of everyone else that lived in that little town. It's a little beach town. Everyone wore flip-flops, rode beach cruisers. At that time, it was like baggy shorts, long t-shirts. And I started tucking in my shirt, a belt. I would get like all like cleaned up. And I'd go to class and people were like, what is wrong with this guy? I just wanted to go completely against the grain and just be as disciplined and organized as possible. And I basically was parenting myself. And I think that this is something that I learned how to do early on. I love my parents, but I learned how to mother and father myself. And that was powerful. It was like, I was a young guy. But let's face it, at 19, you're young, but you're not that young in the sense that if you screw up, if you, I don't know, I had friends who got into drunk driving stuff. A friend of ours was killed in a drunk driving accident. I wasn't real close with him, but I knew him real well. This guy, Phil Shao, great skateboarder, was killed because someone drove drunk. He wasn't driving drunk, dead. A bunch of people dead or in jail. So, when you're 18 or older, like the consequences go super linear, shift, where small mistakes can lead to really bad outcomes. So yeah, I just kind of scruffed myself and was like, let's do this. And, here I am.
I'm so intrigued by that because in that moment you have, I think, a moment in which a lot of people are searching for in their lives where you have a decision to do it differently. And I've always wondered what it takes for someone to get there. And is it something that you can accelerate towards? Like, if I'm laying on the couch right now and I'm feeling that, is there something I can do to get me there, or do I need more pain?
Fear.
I'll
tell you, super scary being like almost 19 years old. Girlfriend left me. I'm not good at anything. I wasn't good at anything. Not skateboarding, couldn't play an instrument. Everyone in that town surfed.
Family.
I mean, I could have gone to the fire service and that's a wonderful career path. I didn't have any like marketable skills. I couldn't really do anything except I knew my capacity to learn. I've always had a very good memory and I've always enjoyed learning. So I thought, okay, school seems like a good option. They tell you what you need to know. In fact, at one point I realized, and I think it was Ryan Holiday that said that, the people who should absolutely not drop out of college are the people who are not doing well, because the real world is a lot harder in many ways. It's a lot harder than college. In college, they tell you what to do. I remember taking a class in Greek mythology. You go there, if you sit near the front, you pay attention, you try not to pay attention to anyone else, you sit down, they tell you what you need to know. Now, sometimes it's complicated, you can't keep up, but then they have these things called office hours where you can ask, they have teaching assistants. I mean, the whole thing is set up so that you almost can't fail if you do the required steps. Whereas with skateboarding, it's like I was always getting broke off, as they say. I was always rolling my left foot, snapped again, nothing, couldn't do it. There's so much uncertainty in other things. At least with a college education, for me, it was like, okay, I can learn this stuff. And then what I found is when there's a desire to learn, and then you learn, and then you do well, and I started doing very well, and But there's that one class that I got a B+ in that I'm still pissed off about. My first year was a disaster. Then it was all A's. And then there's this one class in neural development from Ben Reese. And I got a B+. And as a consequence, when I went to graduate school, I studied neural development. It's the thing that you don't get, the place where you make an error that you forever carry that signal. I need to get better at that. So I think a lot of it is just having the knowledge of self, right? What did the Oracle say? Know thyself. The knowledge of self to really think, okay, what are my strengths? Do I like to learn if I'm interested in something? Do I have a voracious appetite? Maybe if you're a person with less energy, maybe you're more reflective, or you like to journal, or you need more time to process. I think turning what often appear as weaknesses into strengths is really possible. And then I do think that we are all each endowed with some unique gift. I really believe in this. It's not mystical for me. I think that we all have some wiring of our brains that's very similar, and we all have some unique wiring based on our genetics and our experience. And I just thought, I'm going to keep paying attention to what fills my body with energy.
One of the most inspiring and I think liberating things that I've heard in your work is this idea of neuroplasticity, because if the brain can physiologically change based on what I'm doing, then it means that who I am now, my identity, that 19-year-old who's sleeping in the mummy thing with the ferret, isn't who I always have to be. I can literally change. We've spoken a little bit around what causes the motivation to actually change, but knowing that my brain will actually change, those two things are really inspiring for me, because it means that whatever rut I'm stuck in isn't necessarily a permanent one. Now, you said that the motivation to change comes from fear.
Well, in my case, it took a fear circumstance, fear of becoming a permanent failure, to motivate immense change. And that was that circumstance. I do believe, however, that the best work, our most creative and best work, comes from a love of craft. But sometimes in order to find what you truly love, you have to be scared into setting off on a path to find it. And And that goes for relationships too. Sometimes to find the right relationship, or relationships, it could be friendships, romantic relationships, etc. One has to be deathly afraid of having to remain in the relationship that you're in enough to leave. So neuroplasticity is absolutely real. It actually worked out that my scientific great-grandparents, two guys, David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel, won the Nobel Prize for neuroplasticity. Now, they weren't the people who discovered it. It had actually been described for centuries. People understood that young kids can learn more easily than adults can. But David and Torsten won the Nobel Prize for essentially formalizing and discovering the principles of neuroplasticity, how it works. And then some years later, mainly one guy by the name of Mike Merzenich, but there were others that worked with him, discovered that neuroplasticity is actually a feature of the nervous system, the brain, throughout our entire lifespan. The rules change a little bit in terms of how you rewire your brain. But if the question is, can a person change? Can you learn new things? Can you unlearn certain patterns? Can you overcome traumas at any age? The answer is absolutely, categorically, yes. How? Well, it's very clear that as a child, until about age 25, more or less, just passive experience will shape the brain for better or worse. After about age 25, and again, these are not strict cutoffs, we can change our brain, but what's required is a marked shift in the neurochemical environment under which something happens. So one of the reasons why any traumatic event will forever be remembered, although, by the way, you can remove some of the emotional load of that, trauma does not have to be traumatic forever, is because when we see or experience something very intense of a fearful nature, there's the release of certain what we call neuromodulators, things like epinephrine, adrenaline, and other neuromodulators that cause a state shift in our body and brain. And the nervous system recognizes this as unusual, and as a consequence, in the subsequent days, there's reordering of the connections so that the brain can prepare for that event should it happen again. This is why we have what's called one trial learning. You go to a certain location, something terrible happens there. You will forever associate that location with something terrible. But there are tools, therapy and other tools, that can allow the emotional load to be removed from that so that you could go to that location and feel calm, no fear whatsoever. The good news is you can also learn anything you want to learn, provided there's a shift in this neurochemical environment. This is why when we are very interested and focused on something, two of the main requirements for neuroplasticity, we have to be alert and we have to be focused. We can't learn passively as adults. We can't just play, a lecture about AI and large language models or neuroscience in the room, and then the knowledge doesn't just sink in by osmosis. But if we pay attention and we're alert when we pay attention, there's a shift in the neurochemicals associated with that attention, what we call the catecholamines. It's 3 molecules, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, all which cause an increase in alertness, all which cause an increase in focus, a tightening of our visual field and our auditory field. So like cones of attention is one way to think about it. And then it sets in motion a bunch of biological processes such that if we get adequate sleep that night, maybe the next night as well, there's reordering of neural connections so that that knowledge, that new experience is consolidated in your brain. You are forever changed as a consequence of that experience. So when we hear that the brain is constantly changing, everything that we encounter changes our brain, that's not true. Why would the brain change unless it needed to, right? As a child, the brain is basically a template for change. It's trying to understand the environment and make predictions. And so that's true. Neuroplasticity is a cardinal feature of childhood and adolescence and the teen years. And just think about the music you listened to when you were a teen. No other music will ever have as much significance. And that's because as a teen, your body is flooded with hormones and neuromodulators. That the amount of meaning that comes from now seemingly trivial events when you're a teenager or adolescent is immense. That song meant so much, and it's because of the neurochemical milieu it creates in you. But as an adult, it takes a stronger stimulus, as we say. And if you were to fall in love as an adult or see something, a painting that just strikes you as just so unbelievable, yes, then you are forever changed. But just going to see a bunch of paintings at the Met doesn't mean that every single one of those paintings is forever stamped into your brain. The nervous system is very efficient in that way. It doesn't change unless it has to. And it always changes if it needs to in order to keep you safe. This is why there's an asymmetric influence of fear as opposed to just interest in terms of what will shift our brain. But it's nice to know that love and excitement and appreciation are very strong stimuli for changing the brain. And, I can kind of draw to mind conversations I've had with my good friend, Rick Rubin. I'll get accused of name dropping, but I'm very fortunate to be close friends with Rick. And Rick always talks about, how when you just see and experience something and you just have this love for it, it changes the brain. He's not a neuroscientist, but in many ways he's a neuroscientist. So in any case, you absolutely can change your brain, but you have to pay attention to the thing you want to incorporate into your brain. You have to be alert while you do that. And then you absolutely have to go get some rest, because it's during sleep and during meditative states and during rest that the actual rewiring of the brain occurs.
There's a phrase that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think as we get older and older, we become stubborn in part because we're very comfortable with the way things are and routine and whatever. But also I think we start to believe in this idea that we can't change. And that in and of itself makes it harder to change. Are you telling me that you can teach an old dog new tricks?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Let's just destroy that myth now. You absolutely can teach an old dog or human new tricks. We know this. In fact, there's studies, incredible studies that were done down at the Salk Institute in San Diego, showing that even in people who are very old, right? These are people in their 80s and 90s. The human lifespan, probably maximum human lifespan as we understand it, is probably about 120 years, more or less. But most people don't make it to 100. But so 80 or 90 is pretty old. There's still the addition of new neurons occurring. These people who were unfortunately dying of terminal cancer, I believe, but other causes, agreed to take a dye that actually gets incorporated into new neurons. And then after they died, their brains were, looked at under the microscope, and there was the addition of new neurons even at late age. Now, I want to be very clear that most of learning is not the addition of new neurons, at least not in humans. But from everything we know about neuroscience, it's clear that it doesn't matter if you're 90 years old, 70 years old, 50 years old, if you want to learn, you can learn. And that learning occurs through neuroplasticity, which is the reordering of neural connections, strengthening of certain connections, weakening of others, and in some rare cases, the addition of new neurons. But brain change is absolutely real at every stage of life.
I also wonder about habit formation. So you said there that some of the more sort of startling stimuluses like fear are great ways, and obsessive sort of deep focus are great ways to start forming these new behavior patterns. But if I want to break a habit, because there's habits I've got in my life that I've kind of just told myself are who I am. And accordingly, I've just kind of accepted them.
Well, you've been very successful, so.
Yeah, but even thank you. But there's many things I've just accepted it's part of who I am. Some of those come from my childhood. So one of them is that I grew up in a very disorganized home where like the doors inside my house had holes in them, and our house, there was like some rooms that looked like a hoarder lived there, just piles and piles of stuff to the roof. House demolished in many respects. Like the back of the garden was 6 foot high. It was a mess. So I've grown up with mess, and I'm therefore still pretty messy today. And it's something I've always wanted to defeat, but sometimes I tell myself, well, it was hardwired into me when I was a kid, and it is just who I am. And a lot of people go around saying that. They've just kind of identified with and accepted a certain bad habit is part of who they are.
Well, I will say that some of the most brilliant people I know had terribly messy offices. Yeah. And they were very internally organized people. It's kind of interesting. They were like a laser beam in their ability to kind of sort through mess. They didn't see the mess. In fact, my postdoc advisor, who also sadly passed away, an incredible human by the name of Ben Barris, used to walk into his office and there'd just be piles of stuff everywhere. And I'd say, Ben, I think we should clean your office. And he'd say, don't touch anything, because if you move anything, I won't know where it is. And I said, how could you possibly know where anything is right now? And he said, I know where everything is. And so I think some people also, by growing up in or being in that environment, also maintain an uncanny ability to find things. Whereas I'm the sort of person where I can't do any work until everything is cleared away. And so I see myself as on the weaker side of this ability. But to your question, I think stories are very powerful and very dangerous. Stories are the way that humans organize knowledge by and large, right? We don't tend to organize things into lists. We have these narratives that we call stories because from a young age, we learn things not just by hearing them and seeing them, but they are compartmentalized into narratives that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sometimes they have a kind of a crescendo and then a relaxation. Just think about a childhood song of learning like the ABCs. They don't teach you the ABCs, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, right? They don't do that. What do? They give you a song, which is a story. Musicians will understand this inherently. Again, I'm not one, but when I started researching neuroscience of music and the brain, came to understand, so it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? The change in the inflections as one does the alphabet as a young kid is the story of the alphabet. Now, people might say, okay, what is he talking about? What's happening here is you create variation in terms of batching of ideas so that something has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you think, okay, I grew up in this house and it was really messy and now I have too much mess. And in order to undo that, there's this kind of like hardwired, right, dangerous words, hardwired neural circuitry in my brain that I would have to work really, really hard to undo, and I'd have to be scared into being a cleaner person or a more tidier person, whatever it is. That's very dangerous because there's a beginning to that, a middle to that, and an end to that, and it has immense meaning as a consequence. One of the most powerful things is to understand that neuroplasticity really involves taking an existing story and dismantling some component of it. What could the component be? Well, there's all this stuff like the Byron Katie work, which says, you take something that you believe as true and you say, okay, like I'm an untidy person, and then you counter it. How do I know that? Well, okay, I have this experience. Okay, that's the story. And then you start running counter narratives. You say, I'm actually a tidy person. And then people say, well, this is silly. You're just lying to yourself, right? Or they say, is it always true that you're a messy person? You start challenging this story from different sides. Now, I believe, because I'm a neuroscientist, I'm not a psychologist or in the self-help world, that the brilliance, the kind of unconscious genius of that approach is actually that what one is doing is you're starting to create a new story. You're starting to kind of infuse different questions into the existing neural network. Now, the brain loves questions. Like the brain, since we're young kids, we're asking questions. And so if you take an existing story and you start challenging it with questions, you're not saying lie to yourself. You're not suddenly going to say, okay, like I'm super tidy. You're not, because you're not going to believe that. But if you start challenging why it's that way, or you've been able to change so many other things, why wouldn't you be able to change that? Well, you say, well, it's just a habit. I can't do it. You say, well, what's a habit? And you start poking and pushing and pushing. What you eventually arrive at is this kind of, actually, there's nothing keeping me from being a tidy person except this kind of fluency of a particular story. And what you've done is you've interrupted the fluency of that story. So then when you go to the behavior of, do you set things down all over the place or do you put them in an orderly fashion? You start interrupting the habit, the fluency of your typical behavior. So I raise this as a way to kind of shine light on essentially what I do in my podcast career, which is, I believe very strongly in the fields of psychology. I think self-help has some wonderful things to offer. We've got ancient wisdom that goes way back. And when you start to look at things through the lens of biology, you start to see that all of these things actually have merit and they're just different paths to the same outcomes. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to become a tidy person, I would encourage you, here would be one, let's just say neuroscience supported approach would be to write out one page about what a tidy person you really are. You'll know that's a lie, right? And then to look at it and realize that in many ways, if you just replace tidy with, messy at any location, it'd probably be the exact same story. Mm-hmm. And so what you're really talking about here is just a default that your nervous system is running. And if you were to just swap the words, would you feel differently or do differently? On the one hand, you'd say, no, that's kind of trivial. But I bet you the practice of writing it out would forever interrupt your notion of like just going to set something down. You'd be like, now you have something to kind of disrupt the habit. Because so much of habit disruption that you'll look like, some people say, oh, you flick a rubber band on your wrist or something like that. Mm-hmm. There's nothing special about the rubber band. There's nothing special about the pain on your wrist or you put a sticky note. We know sticky notes work for about one day. Why don't sticky notes work? Why don't reminders on the mirror work? Because they don't have enough salience. They're not new. They're not different. The nervous system only changes if something is new and different. So anyway, we could talk a lot about habit formation, but fear works, but so does disrupting the story. How do you disrupt the story? You essentially give the opposite story and you think, well, that's just lying to myself. But neurally, it makes sense because the nervous system, again, likes to be very economical, likes to do everything with the minimum amount of energetic expenditure. And to change anything requires attention, and attention is expensive. Attention is expensive. And also, I would say, as I'm kind of rambling all this, things are going very well for you, so you actually don't have any reason to tidy your space.
I have a PA now and another PA and I have a cleaner. So it's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you outsource it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, there is incentive for all the folks that feel like they're not tidy enough. You have two choices. You can either start to be tidy now, or you can be successful enough that you can hire some assistants. And I actually think, I say this in all seriousness, I think that one has to ask, like, where is my attention and neural real estate best devoted? I think about this every day. I mean, we are living in a war of attention. I wake up in the morning and I can be a consumer or a creator. If I reach for my phone, I'm a consumer. If I go to my journal, I'm a creator. My advice to anyone who wants to be successful in any domain is to do things away from where you broadcast and then take it to that broadcast. I mean, take your real life to Instagram and be very cautious about taking Instagram to your real life. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
if you look at successful people, they're doing things away from the platforms and putting them on the platforms.
Yeah.
So I have to be very careful. Then I go into the kitchen. Obviously, I talk to people in my home. But if I pick up the phone and I start making a phone call, it's like, is this call really about moving the needle forward, or is this just kind of like passive use of attention? We have to be so careful nowadays. So careful. It's really challenging.
On that point of focus and attention, and thinking back to when you were 19 years old, one of the things people ask me a lot, and I guess it's a bit of a debate in the self-help world, is from a neuroscience perspective, is manifestation and this idea of like visualization, visualizing who I want to become and, you know, where I'm going. Is there any neuroscience to support that works?
There is. And I'm not trying to be negative, but I'll start with the negative counterexample for which there is evidence and it's less often discussed. So there's a wonderful researcher at New York University by the name of Emily Balcetis, who talks about how for goal setting and habit formation, fear setting is often one of the best tools. You spend some time, maybe 5 minutes or so, thinking about all the terrible things that are going to happen if you don't actually accomplish your goals. Nobody likes to do this, but guess what? It turns out to be pretty darn effective.
Really?
I know. It's really frustrating that this is the case. But again, you know, that has a lot to do with the way that the human brain is wired and likes to rewire itself. Now, that said, it is important to envision goals. Visualizing goals in detail, writing them out, in some cases talking about them, although we can discuss that, why that might not be the best idea in every circumstance, can be very beneficial because it's hard to conceive something that you can't imagine. But I think when people hear that visualizing goals or visualizing outcomes is critical, we sometimes forget that we don't always know what the end goal is. Sometimes we have to break this up into milestones. This is where I think Rick Rubin, even though he's not a formally trained scientist, has drawn a lot of interest for his work on creativity, which is, you know, Rick is about largely, you know, sensing the kind of energetic pull of an idea and being able to explore that without too much self-judgment or filtering or thinking about how it's going to be received. In other words, that the metamorphosis that leads to great music, great poetry, great scientific discovery, podcasts, finance, companies that one is building, et cetera, is a series of iterations that occur on the time course of about a day, you know? And so we can't always imagine the end or the end product as the outcome. This is why I said university is easy compared to other goals, because the end is a degree, right? So you pick up your diploma. Like, whereas in other areas, it's far more mysterious often. Now, visualization, I think, can be very powerful, but perhaps what's more powerful is to learn the brain and body state that best serves the work you're going to do. So for instance, if I'm going to do some writing, and right now I'm working on a book, it's largely done, but I'm writing some bonus chapters. Unless I'm hyper motivated to do that when I sit down and hyper focused, I'll spend 2-3 minutes just closing my eyes, focusing on my breathing. It's meditation of sorts, but what I tell myself is if I can't focus on my breathing for 2 or 3 minutes, how in the world am I going to focus on writing for 2 or 3 hours? That sort of thing. The other thing that I want to make sure I don't forget is I mentioned that telling people your goals oftentimes can be useful if it stimulates a little bit of fear, like you have some accountability. But we also know that because of the affiliative nature of people, in particular people that support us, there is this danger. A friend of mine who's a cardiologist at UCSF taught me this. He said, you know, be careful who you tell that you're going to start a podcast or write a book, because oftentimes the response will be, oh yeah, that's great. You absolutely should write a book or you should do a podcast. And people get a sort of reward from telling people about it, and then they never actually go do it. Whereas I can cite numerous examples of where people were told, you're never going to be able to do that. You're never going to be able to be successful in that. And my goodness, those people dig their heels and they show that they can do it. Now, I get into debates about this with Rick from time to time. It's unclear to me whether or not the energy around trying to prove oneself is detrimental to the outcome. And I sense it is, right? This kind of grinding against like, oh, take that and take that, as opposed to just doing things out of real love of craft. I think about the way I felt about aquaria and fish as a kid, and it's just like pure delight. That's the word that comes to mind, just delight. I want to learn more about it. I want to do it and tell people about it. That's the wonderful romantic picture of effort and progress and outcomes. But in reality, you probably need both. You need to be able to access some fear and sense of competition, but also delight in craft. like Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, as I recall, defines competition as anti-creativity in many ways, because through competition, you are, by definition, changing what you're doing in order to outdo somebody else or something else. And so you're morphing your creation in order to kind of overcome something. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're just purely thinking about something you want to grow and cultivate, there are none of those barriers. But in the worlds that I've been in, science, to a lesser extent podcasting, and that's a wonderful feature of podcasting, but certainly in science, it is hyper competitive, right? Two laboratories working on similar things, people are concerned that if one publishes first, the other will not be able to publish, certainly not in as high quality a journal. And jobs are created through these journal publications. Podcasting is actually a wonderful field because let's say you and I have the same guest on our podcast. All it does is raise it in the algorithm. It's not like, and it's and so I think there's a lot of collegiality and camaraderie in the podcast field that exists in little pockets in science, but science is a brutally competitive field, which doesn't mean it's anti-creative, but in a dream world where there's infinite amount of money for scientific research, because that would better humanity in my view, and people didn't have to be competitive about grant dollars or publication, I think we would make far more progress as a species. So competition fosters outcomes. This is clear in markets. It's clear in a lot of domains. But pure love and delight of craft and creativity, that's definitely the way to go. But in most endeavors, you got to have both. If sitting next to someone in class and realizing, okay, because this was me back when, I'm thinking, okay, I love this topic, but gosh, I want that top mark. I want that top mark on the distribution. Like that's, and like she and he are really, really good. And we're going to study together. But my God, when it comes time for that exam, like I'm going for it. A little bit of competition can bring out our best, I think, certainly in sport. But when it comes to creative endeavors that are really about our own unique contribution, I mean, you could tell me more about this in business because I have a company, but I'm not a business person. But I always feel like competition can bring out more energy, but not more creativity.
Yeah, and I think a big point I was thinking as you were talking was just about how much you let that new energy that comes from competition distract you. And it's the distraction that can destroy you. Because if Apple are going this way and they're building this product without the keyboard and without the stylus, and they've got their vision, and they see Samsung doing something over there. And if they divert from their own mission and their own first principles towards what someone else are doing, then that's when it can become destructive. But if it means that they see Samsung doing something and they speed up and invest more in their vision, then it's okay. I think and it is this dichotomy between competition does drive better outcomes for everybody that's competing, but at the same time, it can harm you if it distracts you in a fundamental way. It's kind of how I think about it. Even with podcasting, like, as you were saying, there's so many podcasters doing so many amazing things. Like I look at your podcast and I learn from it, but I know in my core, and we all know, I'm never going to be Andrew Huberman.
Well, and I'll never be you.
And I'll never be a Joe Rogan. Yeah. I'll never be a Lex.
And I admire your podcast very much, and Joe's and Lex's. I think we each have our own unique style that we bring to it. Chris Williamson, it's been a lot of fun to see the unique flavors of podcasts crop up and how similar that is to the world I grew up in skateboarding, the observations from the music industry that I saw firsthand, or that, Rick has passed along. In the end, I think any creative endeavor is really about, and here I don't want to sound mysterious or woo, it's about the energy that we bring. It's about taking our life history and bringing it to that thing in whatever form. We don't even need to tell people our life history. Taking our unique wiring and bringing it to that thing. And we can, again, look at things through the lens of biology and say, well, what are we talking about when we're talking about energy? What is this energy thing that people are talking about? And I think it largely boils down to these catecholamines, the dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine cocktail that is setting the brain into a mode of attention, of motivation. We now know dopamine is more about motivation to seek rewards as opposed to feeling of pleasure or reward. There's a lot to be said about that. And keep in mind that these three neurochemicals, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, have been the neurochemical cocktail by which humans and other mammals have set and pursued goals for hundreds of thousands of years. So we don't have like a unique system, a unique neurochemical system for seeking out of mates versus food versus creating shelter versus creating technology and whole societies. And it's not just these three neurochemicals. Certainly there are other things involved, acetylcholine and a bunch of other things, neuroplasticity for that matter. But it's clearly the case that the currency that the brain has set around getting us into forward center of mass, as I say, to like envision something, explore. Nope, not down there, this way. There's a scent here. And trade out an actual scent for, there's something interesting here. There's someone interesting here. And like exploring that, no, that's a dead path too. Cul-de-sac, turn around, go, here. And then connecting these nodes of progress. What's progress? There's kind of another surge of these catecholamines, which sets us in forward center of mass. I don't want to oversimplify the biology, but when we talk about energy, for instance, taking time to rest at night, sleep, taking time to maybe meditate a few minutes or do this practice that I'm a huge fan of, non-sleep deep rest, which is kind of a body scan, deep relaxation, long exhales. It's a practice very similar to an ancient practice called yoga nidra, which has been practiced for thousands of years. It's a kind of pseudo sleep. And we know from a really nice study that NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, aka yoga nidra, can increase the baseline levels of dopamine in a brain area called the basal ganglia, which is for action generation and also withholding action, by about 60% from baseline. Just a short period of doing this practice can re-up dopamine levels to a considerable extent. It's a remarkable study, and there are others like it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that in rest, we build up this capacity to be forward center of mass when we emerge from rest. That's why I think we have to sleep every 24 hours. This is why practices where we deliberately calm ourselves and still ourselves allow us to be more forward center of mass mentally and physically afterwards. It's kind of a duh when we hear it. We kind of go, duh, of course, rest, action. But there's a lot more to it. If you start exploring the layers, you start realizing that excitement for things versus burnout. What's burnout? It's just trying to be forward center of mass for too long. It's, misuse of our dopamine circuitry. It's, ignoring the fact that these catecholamines and dopamine in particular, they are not infinite in their availability, right? There's a reservoir of them that can be depleted, but it can be replenished as well. And one of the best analogies for this was actually explained to me by a guy named Dr. Kyle Gillette. He does some online work as a public-facing physician, endocrinology in particular. And he said, with dopamine, it's kind of like a wave pool. You have this reservoir that can allow you to pursue things or scroll the internet or build businesses, whatever it is. If you are really forward center of mass very intensely, you start generating these waves. And if you get big waves of dopamine and they crash out of the pool, you start depleting the reservoir. So when I think about drugs of abuse like cocaine, which leads to huge surges in dopamine, or amphetamines, huge surges in dopamine. What do we know about huge surges in dopamine? Well, after those huge surges, you drop below your initial baseline to a state in which the same thing doesn't feel as good anymore. You need so much more energy to get the same output.
That's what this is, right?
That's what this is. So
I'll put this on the screen for anyone.
Yeah, so my colleague at Stanford, Dr. Anna Lemke, who runs our dual diagnosis addiction clinic and wrote the wonderful book Dopamine Nation, described this best. It's sort of like a seesaw, but whereby you get a big peak in dopamine, let's say from a drug of abuse like cocaine. People on cocaine, it's all about ideas and what's next. They're not like, hey, let's just kick back. It's all about in fact, they have 1 million ideas per second. Most of them are terrible ideas, but they're very forward center of mass, motivated. And then when the drug wears off, they feel very low and very depressed. The dopamine is actually depleted below baseline. People that work excessively, right? We all have different abilities to work out, but people that work excessively and abuse stimulants in order to do that achieve these peaks.
Is that so what would be an everyday example of that, working excessively? Do you mean like pre-workout or something, or do you mean?
Yeah, I'm not anti-pre-workout. Listen, I love to be well-rested, hydrated, have a nice pre-workout drink, maybe even a little shot of espresso, listen to some music, and have an incredible leg day workout. It's an amazing feeling, right? But if you do that every single time, you start stacking all these catecholamine release-inducing drugs, okay? So you're getting adrenaline, you're getting epinephrine, which is adrenaline, excuse me. You're getting adrenaline, you're getting noradrenaline, also called norepinephrine. You're getting dopamine release. You're highly motivated. You're in that state that everyone is seeking, and you try and do that 7 days a week, you're not going to do it. And then you wonder why in the afternoon you're just completely cooked and you can't do any cognitive work. Well, your dopamine and other things have crashed below baseline. So I think it's important to understand that being, as I'm calling it, forward center of mass, like really kind of motivated and pursuing goals is great. But most of the time we're probably best off just coming off the gas pedal just a little bit to maintain that ability to continue to be forward center of mass. The same thing is true for stress. We hear stress is bad. Well, stress is bad, but it also sharpens your ability to learn. It creates energy. It actually boosts your immune system in the short term. I say tolerate as much stress as you can, provided you still behave like a kind person, right? Don't say or do things that are unkind, and make sure that you still get great sleep at night. Most people stress, run around, and then they can't sleep at night. And then the next day they're depleted. But a little bit of stress is healthy. Life is stress. Things are stressful. But again, you're going to be in your best state of mind if you're calm and alert. Alert and calm is the magic recipe, and the ability to sleep at night. If you want to take a bunch of pre-workout and you want to listen to some loud music and have a great crush it workout, great. But you should probably also be able to train without all of that. If you're somebody who loves new goals and you're very excited about travel and this and that, great. But do you have to layer in 50 things and then you're sitting around at home and you're wondering why you're so bored when you're back home and why life is so depressing and you need more travel, more stimulation? In every domain of life, we see whether or not it's food or exercise or stimulants or sex or media. If you push things to the max, you're going to feel depleted and understimulated afterwards. And this trough below baseline, as Anna Lemke taught us with Dopamine Nation, that trough is a state that can last a long time. And it's how long? It's proportional to how high that peak in dopamine was. Not how long, but how high that peak in dopamine was. And when you're in that trough, that dopamine depleted state, typically what people do is they try and go out or access things that are going to reactivate the dopamine circuitry. And all it does is drive them further and further and longer into that trough. What's needed is a period of waiting, of non-indulgence in any of these excesses that allows them to return to baseline. We know this from drugs of abuse. It takes more and more drug to try and get what turns out to be less and less of a high. Most all addiction, most all compulsive behavior can be cured, essentially, through a period of abstinence lasting somewhere between 30 and 60 days, which to somebody who's highly motivated to seek that thing or do that thing sounds like an absolute horror. But that is highly effective. So for some people, it's work and stimulants, a number of people taking Adderall and work. I hear from these people all the time. Typically, they are from the tech and finance world. And they're like, why am I burnt out? Well, you've been blasting these catecholamine regulated circuits for years. You need to just accept you're going to feel a little low for a week. Then you're going to feel a little less low. Then you're going to come back to baseline. And then, and only then, can you really get back into like full forward center of mass. But at that point, you can introduce, I do think there is a clinical use case for certain ADHD meds, which are amphetamine. There are certain people that need those meds. Other people have driven themselves into this dopamine trough. And so they're seeking out anything and everything to get them out of that trough, when really what they need to do is stay away from all that stuff and just wait. Just wait.
Go on holiday or something.
Go on holiday. Try and find reward in smaller things. This is why dogs are wonderful, in simpler things. And if that sounds heavy and dull to you, chances are you're a bit in the dopamine loop. I've been in these loops before. They're hard to exit, but once you exit them, you look back on them and you go, what was I thinking? Well, you were in a different state. You're kind of a different animal when you're in pursuit.
I think this is so unbelievably important because it really helps people to understand why they do what they do. And before you doing the research on you coming here today and before understanding some of this stuff, I thought dopamine was I don't know, it was this thing that came in these hits maybe. And if I did something, I got ahead of it, then I returned to baseline. If I did something again, stimulating, I got ahead of it, then I returned to baseline. But what actually is happening is I'm doing something that's stimulating in some way. I'm getting this huge peak, then I'm crashing below baseline for a while. And when I'm below baseline, that's when I'm most likely to want to do something that's going to give me a hit again.
That's right.
And when I saw that, it reminded me of the CGI monitor, the continuous glucose monitor that I wore, because it was a very similar pattern. Mm-hmm. If I had a lot of sugar, I had a big peak, then I crashed below my baseline.
Right. That's a great observation. And it's the perfect analogy. Perfect analogy, because these regulatory systems are all about trying to maintain homeostasis. We learn about homeostasis, like the desire for balance. The human body and human physiology is actually geared more towards something called allostasis, which involves kind of stress modulation. But without getting into too many details, these are dynamic systems, meaning brain systems that are designed to allow us to overcome challenges if need be, right? This is why I always push back on the idea that, stress crashes your immune system. You know what crashes your immune system? Being very, very stressed, working a lot, caretaking for someone else, and then stopping. You always get sick when you stop.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because actually stress activates the immune system. Makes sense that it would do that evolutionarily, right? And then when we rest, boom, our immune system kind of relaxes a little bit, and then we succumb to that the bacteria or virus. So what does it mean? It means that we should probably learn to modulate. It's like driving a car. Anytime we feel that we're headed toward or in a peak state, we should probably kind of like lean back off that state just a tiny bit, especially if that peak state is coming by way of pharmacology or some extreme circumstance. Just back off a little bit, maybe a lot, okay? So when we do that, we learn to master the transition states between these, what I'm referring to as forward center of mass, flat-footed, or back on my heels. It's a term I learned from a former Navy SEAL operator. He said, with anything in life, you can either be back on your heels, like really challenged, flat-footed, kind of like calm and forward, or forward center of mass, like full tilt. I think most people would do very well to learn to master the transition states between waking and going to sleep, right? Many people can't fall asleep. Many people just kind of like can't turn it off. You can learn how to do that by doing things like non-sleep deep rest, some long exhale breathing, simple, self-directed, zero-cost tools that help adjust your autonomic nervous system to be more what we call parasympathetic, more rest and digest, just long exhales. Might not work the first time, but over time, these become very effective tools to self-direct the shift from forward center of mass to flat-footed to just kind of laying back on your heels. And there you go, you're off to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, some people are just depleted. Maybe you didn't sleep enough, but learning to get forward center of mass shouldn't require, excess caffeine and stimulants and super loud music and, a shocking text or email. Ideally, you can transition pretty quickly into being forward center of mass, but not full tilt forward center of mass. And why do I say this? I think for anyone who seeks to be successful in any domain, academics, business, creative endeavors, whatever, if you want to have a long arc life and a long arc career, you really strive to control these transition states. And when I say control, all it really takes is paying attention to them and paying attention to the fact that, yes, some people just have inherently more energy. They can do every single workout at max output, then shower, they're talking in the gym, then they're off to that. Some people are like that. Some people, like myself, if I give 100% to something in the morning, by the afternoon, I'm a little bit depleted. So I require a 10 or 20 minute non-sleep deep rest or a nap or just some quiet long exhale breathing, maybe a little bit of caffeine, which I'm drinking now. I mean, there's nothing wrong with healthy stimulants, provided they're consumed in moderation. Maybe an energy drink, those can be great too for some people. And then, really going like full tilt, focusing one's attention. And then afterwards, taking a few moments, just moments to downshift. I think we hear so much about the power of meditation or non-sleep deep rest or ice baths. What do cold plunges and cold showers do? They stimulate the release of what? The catecholamines, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, long duration release. That's why it's useful, in my opinion. For all the debate about deliberate cold exposure, does it increase metabolism? Does it not? The answer seems to be probably not much, but it's absolutely clear that it causes a huge increase in adrenaline, dopamine, and norepinephrine that are very long lasting. And that makes you feel great, especially when you get out of the cold. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the value of it. It also saves you on your heating bill. Like you don't have to have a cold plunge. You take a cold shower. Nobody likes it, but the point is you get out and you feel different. It's a state shift. So That's great, but you don't want to do it to excess, because then, for instance, people always say, how long should I go in the cold plunge or cold shower? And I say, do it the minimum amount,